Hey, Tony. Good evening, everyone. We are back. We are moving on to item 3.6, which is a approval of the operating and capital budgets and the schedule of fees and charges. We do have a few memos from colleagues here that we will be discussing. Since there's no presentation, though, let's go to public comment first.
Anil Babar.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Anil Babar with the California Apartment Association. I'm here to speak on the fees and charges issue, but more specifically, the increase in the tenant protection ordinance fees that are charged to all non-rent controlled buildings in the city. The fee was originally set to be $34 this year. That's a 127% increase over the previous year. Thankfully, due to the manager's budget addendum 51 and through the work of the city manager and the budget director, they lowered that increase to 23. But it's still scheduled to go up to 34 the following fiscal year, which would represent a 483% increase over 7 years. That amount is just unconscionable. Obviously, the program's not being managed properly to the point where you need to raise these fees double digits or in some cases triple digits every year to make it pencil. I want to also add, and thankfully Council Member Dev Davis pointed this out a month ago when we talked about this last, that the program's actually managing fewer units this year, approximately 30% fewer units, my math's probably a little off, and it's still going up. None of this actually makes any sense. What we need is more accountability in this program. We need caps on the ways the fees are being increased. Otherwise, they'll just go up year after year because this program is clearly seen as a blank check for the housing department to charge whatever they want and charge it to the TPO program. We need an audit to understand where the money's going, what money's being spent on, and we just need a cap on the program. Put a 5% cap on the program. The city should be able to manage within that 5% what they need to do with that budget. They've told the property owners that year over year. I think they should apply to the same rules to themselves. Thank you.
Paul, followed by TM.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. What I'd like to talk about is racial equity becoming institutionalized. And if there ever was a portion of government where racial equity policies need to be instituted, it's this one. You see, we're not going to get anywhere if we neglect to intentionally insert those policies in this context. Now, I'm going to assume that the mayor just forgot. It just slipped his mind. Because with all this talk of inclusion and diversity, and okay, well, there's still a debt that needs to be cleared. And that debt is that wealth was generated and accumulated by virtue of that redlining map in direct violation of the Constitution. The Constitution says you cannot take life, liberty, or property without just compensation. Well, that was taken from us. And in these capital budgets, when I read them, I don't see that acknowledgement or amendment being reflected back to me. So as a citizen, I have to come here. It's my job to hold you to account for that. We're gonna get there. When, I don't know, but we're gonna get there to where we are going to institutionalize racial equity, and it is going to be reflected in every single budget. Why? because racism literally infected every single area of my existence in my life and the existence of Chicanos for generations. Thank you.
TM,
Hi there, you can hear me?
yes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor and council members, Council Davis, and Ortiz, I believe, that have supported the funding for Med 30 for the fire department. A little bit of history in that I am a resident of District 6. So again, Councilmember Davis, I thank you. When I am a San Jose firefighter as well. When I applied years ago, that I had competed against approximately 4,000 applicants for the position of a firefighter. And nowadays, we're only seeing applications of around 50, with the last hiring process of only 17 applicants that had a interview with 19 applicants. And I'm not sure where the loss of interest into becoming a San Jose firefighter has been. And it's a long road ahead of us before we can start bringing up our numbers. Paramedics are extremely short-staffed within San Jose. Mayor Mahan, I heard you earlier indicate about workload and bringing on workload. Well, it's bred into a San Jose firefighter to take on what we can, even if it's beyond what we're capable of. And that's what we're doing if we cut a position of Med 30. We are cutting firefighters, even though it's been proposed that we're increasing our staffing. And I want to ask for your support. Thank you.
Back to the council.
Thank you, Tony. Okay. So we have a, let's see any colleagues' hands here. Just on the Med 30 topic, can the administration give us a little bit of context on, I know it was dealt with in, I believe it was the final MBA. Was that 60? I've lost count. Was that 60? That was a lot of MBAs, Joe.
Yes, we
And
had a
team.
lot. We had a lot this year. It was really a bear. Jim, could you talk a little bit more about our recommendation and what the discussions we've had with the fire department, given the concerns that some of the council members had brought up during the budget study sessions?
Yeah, for sure. Again, Jim Shannon, City's Budget Director. After the budget study sessions, we had some additional conversation, and maybe just to rewind a little bit. So the administration had put forward sort of the elimination of the 3 fire captain positions, to have that work reallocated amongst the rest of the fire department in tandem with the establishment of a 6th battalion, so adding 3 battalion chiefs. And so the administration put forward that recommendation, not to decrease the level of service or to decrease public safety by any means, but to be the most effective deployment of the resources that we have available. But as you know, the chief had indicated, it will be a transition as the conversation went during the study sessions, and as we had some additional conversations with the fire department, they had recommended that it would make some sense to have a captain on standby to serve as a department infection control officer, which is the stickiest piece of the reallocation of the Med 30 duties. And so what we have is part of MBA 60, which is we do have the recommendation to take some project savings from a fire capital project for $125,000 to allow for the standby pay of the Department Infection Control Officer, to be able to assess that work for the next 6 months to make sure that the transition works appropriately, and we will continue to monitor that, and the fire department will, of course, continue to monitor that. And if we need to extend that or recommend further adjustments, we would certainly bring those forward to the council for their consideration to make sure that we're maintaining our public safety duties. But so that's kind of the scope of the conversation and what's in the various MBAs and an MBA 60.
Okay. Thank you. And just again, the 125,000 gets us 6 months and then a check-in point. And I may have missed it. Was that a point where we convene at PISFIS or City Council?
It would be the mid-year budget review, and then
In the mid-year,
either
okay.
we would, if we needed more of a runway, we would recommend additional funding at that time. And we would commit to an evaluation of it so you could have all the information. But we thought that was a prudent way to address some of the concerns that we heard, gives the chief a little bit more leeway in that transition time as Jim described.
Thank you. Yeah, that does seem like a prudent approach. And I will say I'm glad that we're listening and being responsive. I'm a bit concerned about the cuts that have been proposed in the group memo there. So at least currently not ready to support that or the ongoing deficit that would be created there. On the other group memo that was attached, I wanted to ask on the license fees. So this is recommendation 1. Dog and cat license fees for those meeting certain income eligibility criteria. So I appreciate the goal here and likely support this, but I just want the numbers to be transparent as always. What is the revenue the city receives from that license fee, and roughly what amount of that do we think would be impacted by an income eligibility criteria that basically waived the fee for lower income residents, which I think is a good goal.
So the budgeted revenue for that is about $76,000 for those licenses. The amount that would be subject to what the potential ordinance is seeking, we don't know what that figure is. I think we'd have to come back with that. Presumably it would be probably a substantially smaller figure than what that $76,000 is. I don't know. I don't want to put a number on it, but I imagine it's not terribly large.
Okay, so the ceiling is 76,000, but it won't even be that much.
Right.
Okay, that seems reasonable to me. So it's something I would support. As we get to Rec 2, I'm a little nervous about the sort of sweeping language here of a comprehensive review. Again, good goal. I support the sentiment, but I'm a little worried about just staff workload. I know we did during, I don't know if it was the March message or during the maybe it was during the study session on fees and charges. I know there was some direction given to the administration to come back and I believe help us better understand the fees and charges.
Yeah.
I think it was Councilor Foley or maybe Vice Mayor or maybe both who spoke to that. Can this be folded into that in a way that doesn't kind of balloon to taking away from other critical priorities?
Yes, I think that would be a great way to go, and then we can talk about, because I think we need to, as we discussed during the budget study sessions, to my recollection, I've been here a long time, we've really not done a deep dive into fees and charges for years and years. And so there are certain fees that we have that are meant to be cost recovery and ones that can be lower than cost recovery for some of the exact same reasons that are outlined here in this memo. And I think it'd be great to review all that with the council as part of that study session that we've committed to, that we would be bringing back after the start of the new calendar year. So it's plenty of time for the budget process. But I'm a little concerned about doing this review now I'm not sure with staff resources, because it would be a big lift, but depending on what council direction came out of that study session, then we can do direction to all of the departments as part of their development of the fees and charges for the following fiscal year.
Okay, that's helpful. And that would be early next year, would be the timing prior to the March message and the
Correct.
kickoff of the formal budget process. And then Rec 3 would certainly be relevant to recommendation 1. And are you comfortable with the timing? Is the administration comfortable with the timing of that?
Jim, I'm comfortable. Are you comfortable?
I think that is comfortable, but I totally need to correct an error that I just made earlier. When I was referencing the $76,000, I was looking at the adoption category, which was wrong. Thank you for John Cicerelli to run to my ear.
Thank you, John.
So that proposed for the license fee category, that is a $1.9 million figure. So that's
a little different.
Quite a bit. So thank you for that important clarification.
Good job, John.
I think the ultimate answer to the question is I don't think we know what the reduced revenue loss is. So I thought it's still worth doing the work, but the impact could be larger.
Yep. Okay. So I see, I've just been walking through these to get more context for us as a group while I see some hands have gone up. So on the first there, then I'd certainly support studying that, but given the amount of revenue there, I'd want to fully understand impacts. That's then tied to Rec 3, and then it sounds like Rec 2 would be acceptable. It would make sense to the administration if we were to fold that into when you all come back early next year with a study session on fees and charges. And then on the other memo, I think I've already expressed some of my concerns there. So let me now turn to colleagues. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to what was referenced by the representative of the Apartment Association regarding the tenant protection ordinance fee. And I know that one of the things that could possibly happen is that we are getting a new housing director, and perhaps an assessment of the fees or an audit of the fees would be appropriate. So I would be very much in favor of having staff take a look at it, and as a new person comes in, it might be an appropriate time to take a look at some of these fees to see if it's, operating in the way that it should.
And we would be fine with that. I think that given the concern of the community, I think that would be a good thing to do. And I think we can commit, Jim, I'm committing, Jim, you're not.
I'm ready.
No, Jim, I think what it would be good is to break down what are the costs that go into this fee. I think that we could issue some sort of information memo, an MBA or something that actually breaks down what makes up why it's whatever per unit fee it's going to be next year, what is the time, and what are the activities that go into it. I think it needs more transparency so people understand that. And so we're certainly willing to do that.
Vice Mayor, is there a motion there? Do you want to?
Do you need a motion to direct staff, or is that
Well, I
something
wasn't
you
sure
could
if
take
you were
back?
deferring it to come back after study?
No.
or you would- Okay, so this
No, I'm okay with
increase-
it because it was also something that was brought up by
Yes.
Councilmember Davis.
Correct.
And I think that it does need a look at. So I was just
Yeah.
mentioning
You have my
that-
commitment that we will do that.
Okay, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, Jim? Okay.
Councilor Dewan.
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, I got a question regarding the $125,000 just to have a captain standing by as infection control. The Med 30 function is a lot more than just being infection control. I know that the fire department at one point is hire a civilian as an infection control to help the fire department in EMS, vaccine, and so on. I believe they already have that position filled. Why would we need to have that $125,000 one time or 6 months for a standby captain? When you look at Med 30, is consider a full-time captain on every single shift, right? And that Med 30, most of the time arrive on scene early, assess the situation. Sometimes they even do a rescue. They do triage. They do infection control. They replenish the supplies for all 33 stations, and many other function. And I think it's a disservice to our community if we remove that position. And somewhere down the line, a lot of our station is, we used to have dual station, now we're down to one. We have station 37, but yet station 33 is unmanned. And then now we're going to cut more position, even though we have position for the needed battalion chief, but the battalion chief is not going to oversee a lot of those function as Met 30. Battalion chief mostly run his or her battalion. They're not out there in the field to be like Met 30. So I was a little concerned, why would we want to go through that $125,000 for 6 months and standing by for a captain to do infection control.
Yeah, I think if we like, we could have Chief Sapian come down and sort of answer more of those operational questions, council member.
Good evening, Robert Sapian, Fire Chief. Thank you for the question, council member. I think your question asks what the, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, what will the 125,000 achieve? Is that the question?
Yes, and will it take away Med 30 position?
Okay, so as the city manager said, one of the more critical functions that we were trying to ensure would be covered was 24/7 availability of a department infection control officer. That is a trained skill set, and so we want to make sure that there's someone available for response to the more acute cases. My direction to staff as we contemplated this change was to ensure that all Med 30 functions were covered either equally or better than we were providing them previously. That is the one area that I wanted to shore up with certainty, and so the duties and responsibilities overall will be covered and there will be continuity of those services. They will just be assigned to different areas of the field. The Department Infection Control Officer duties that cannot be covered with on-duty personnel will have available resources by way of standby. That means a certified EMS staff officer will be available at all times. And as you said, we also have a nurse practitioner that is trained in that as well. So that's how we'll maintain that service.
So let me clarify this. You have our EMS staff, right? From your EMT staff to your medic staff, and then you have a nurse who are qualified to do infection control. Why would you have a redundancy to have another infection control personnel?
So it would be the same people, but it would offer service on a 24-hour basis. So those staff people work a 40-hour work week, and so it would mean they would be available for callback on their off-duty hours.
So those staff are not out there in the front line, am I correct?
That's correct.
And those staff doesn't respond to emergency call, being out there as Med 30 responsibility to be on scene, call in resources, be a safety officer, and multifunctional duties for our firefighter. And I heard just recently, I forgot which engine company it was, it said, thank God for Med 30 that was there, or else we would have been in deep trouble. It troubled me that we're going to cut staff and replace with something else. And I think if we look at the importance of Med 30s and the personnel in Med 30, what the service to their communities is essential. I don't understand why would we cut the position just to say we replace with an infection control. Infection control officers do not go on scene, do not assess, do not go in and assist, do not call in for resource. They're not safety officer. They're not rehab. They're not triage. Those are all the missing function, Chief, and I'm aware of it. I understand that your position is try to minimize the cost, but at what cost? At the cost of our residents not getting the full services. Lives is on the line, not only our residents, but also our firefighter as well. I like to hear that you're cutting 3 positions, correct? Technically, 3 shifts, A, B, and C, and you're replacing it with an infection control.
Well, in terms of the field response unit, there's 2 proposals that are separate. One is the battalion chief, the addition of a 6th battalion. That's 3 individuals or 1 on duty per day. and a separate proposal, which is the reduction of Med 30, which is 3 captain positions per day. The total daily staffing remains the same. Right now, it's 190 on duty at a time. So there is, in fact, position reductions and position increases, but the total daily staffing is the same.
So the total daily staffing is still, according to our stat, is that we still have the staffing as of 2009. And if you cut position of Med 30 and you put in the battalion chief does not respond to all medical calls or infection control or any other fire out there. They only respond within the battalion. Am I correct?
Well, as I stated, the direction to staff is to ensure that duties and responsibilities of Med 30 going forward will be equal or an improved status from what they are today. So in terms of who will take on those functions, we're still working through some of that. But I wouldn't say it's correct to say that a battalion chief only responds within the battalion. We have response protocols that take them all over town, as you're aware of.
Correct, as needed. I don't see how you enhance the program when you only replace all the function to one thing, infection control. Am I correct that all of the firefighter, including Local 230, is totally against this because of their safety?
I have not heard that, no. And I have to be honest, I haven't done that kind of polling.
Chief, I've talked to many firefighters, and prior to make that decision, I would hope that you reach out to all 33 station and Local 230 and all 3 shift. And if you haven't done that homework, then how can you make a clear decision?
Well, I suppose I am relying on my years of service in the department and my awareness of the programs and their needs. And I made an assessment of our ability to maintain that work, again, at a state of either equal or better status.
If you made your singularity decision without having involvement of all your battalion chief, division chief, well, deputy chief, and all the firefighters, then it's clearly not for the departments. And I ask that you reconsider your thoughts on this, and maybe we should pull this item and reconsider to other option, because as of right now, I don't think you can get any firefighter out there to agree to your plan, or any battalion chief for that matter. And I think if you do that, that you're doing a huge disservice to our community. My time is out. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, council member. Councilor Torres?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Actually, before I ask questions of staff, Mayor,
Yes,
I
council member.
believe Local 230 is on Zoom. I don't know if anybody from Local 230, can I ask Local 230 a question for, I mean, I have 10 minutes.
You can ask a
deal with
question.
minutes.
Is there somebody in the chamber you want to ask a question of?
Well, I don't know, I don't see Local 230 here, but
Zoom?
I thought they were on Zoom. Was, I think Matt Tuttle was on Zoom?
Yes, he's on Zoom.
All right. And so, because I was trying to keep up with Councilmember Dewan. Matt, can you hear me?
I've clicked allow to talk,
Oh, okay. Well,
but he has not unmuted, so
okay.
he may not be paying attention.
all right. Then, while I wait for Matt, Jim, I have just a couple of questions on the memo that was signed on by the other Brown Act budget group. We had two ones. The other group. So the question is to Jim is the vacancies that we have that I listed from MBA 21. I just want to make sure these are vacant positions, right? No one is losing their job or being reassigned somewhere else, right?
Correct. So these are vacant positions, the ones that are listed there, the accounts receivable staffing, Bureau of American Medical Services, and the IT staffing. Those are vacant positions.
Right. And because we had hundreds and thousands of discussions on the budget, can you explain to us number 3? Again, I know that I included in our budget, and I'm trying to pull up my notes, but I can't find it. So can you explain why I added number 3 in this memo?
Yeah, so I think what the direction that was trying to be achieved here was to be able to get to that total of about $1.2 million to restore the Med 30 program. And so one of the reductions that you're citing here is the the radio replacements, which is a reduction of $500,000 on a one-time basis only. So that's the only item that is in your list here that is one-time and not ongoing. So to make that balance out, your recommendation is to reduce the future deficit reserve, which only has ongoing funding allocated to it in the proposed budget. And so by reducing the ongoing future deficit reserve, so taking that from 18.8 to 18.3 or so, that is then becomes a balanced transaction to restore the Med 30 program.
All right, and before I ask the other question for Matt, and I'm sorry, before I go on to the next memo, is staff okay with the memo outline, with the information outlined here?
From a technical perspective, it works. It's not our recommendation.
Okay, but it works. Great.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in here on a couple of points as we're sort of talking about this. You know, we obviously put in good faith the trade-off memo, so there could be choices made in that memo for other things that the council may want to fund. The reducing the future deficit reserve automatically puts us into a deficit position next year, and I just want to be clear on that. And again, this is up to council decision on that. That's the piece. While we did not obviously recommend this, that would be the piece that would be the most concerning, would be the 500,000 reduction given our uncertain future economic times. I also just want to say, I feel like compelled to say, we do rely on our fire chief, although we do obviously take feedback from employees, but the fire chief is ultimately accountable for the operational decisions of the fire department. So we do rely on him, and I have to tell all that our fire chief is really outstanding and probably one of the smartest operational fire chiefs we've had in my experience in 32 years. And so I just want to, I do trust him in his judgment, and he is on his game. I just want to give everybody that reassurance on monitoring and especially on performance and giving me updates on a regular basis, as well as the assistant city manager. So I just want to make sure that you all have that assurance that I do think we have one of the finest fire chiefs probably in the nation, and who is watching the operational decisions very closely. And so I personally trust him very, very much when he's making recommendations to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, are you on?
Matt Tuttle?
Yes, can you hear me?
And the question was, is Local 230, what does Local 230 think about removing Med 30 from next year's budget?
We know that right now that we need both the 6th Battalion and we still need Med 30. We think that they're very important positions. We think that it only enhances our emergency response, the overseeing the day-to-day operations, and ultimately too, the Med 30 position directly supports our paramedics 24/7, and it's 3 people, as the council member pointed out, 1 a day that's available for any kind of EMS issues that come up. So we're in support of the council members' memo and those that signed up. So we thank you for that support.
All right, great. Thank you. And then, Okay, and then with that, I'm gonna make a motion, but I wanted to make the, I wanted to make a motion, but before I do, I wanna, because I'm squiggling here, in the other memo, fees and services for the kitties and the doggies, because I don't want to confuse them. Number 2 was just change the language into a study session. Is that what you said, Mayor?
Well, number 1 would actually, given that we'd be talking about potentially impacting, it was over $1.5 million in revenue. I think strong suggestion was that we would need to do more analysis before we create an ordinance to exempt those fees, just because the dollar amount, first we thought it was $76,000, which sounded like something we could absorb. So the recommendation would be on number 1, Rec 1, to, at least this was my recommendation, study that, analyze it, and come back. Along with Rec 3, because that would, be reflecting that exemption. And then on the Rec number 2, the recommendation from the administration, at least as I understood it, was to fold that into the study session we would be having on just better understanding all of our fees and charges.
All right.
Those were the recommended modifications from the administration as I understood it.
Okay. So then with that, with my 2 minutes left, I make a motion to accept item 3.6, approval of the 2020-23 operating capital budget, along with Councilmember myself, Councilmember Davis, Ortiz, Duan, Batras, Med 30, along with Councilmember Ortiz, Torres, Duan, Batras, fees and for the kitties and the doggies with the language that the mayor provided, because I didn't write it down.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So the second memo there with the dog and cat license fee modified as I described, which was just my reflection of what I heard from the administration, and then moving the other memo as currently worded, which I continue to have some concerns about. But let's continue the conversations. We have a motion on the floor. I had next hand up was Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Wanted to see, I think Matt Lush is here. Hey, Matt, if you could come down and share your thoughts on the recommendation for the animal care fees. I believe that's what it's called. Yeah.
The license fees for dogs and
There you
cats.
go, license fees.
Apologize. So Matt Lesh, Public Works. In terms of my thoughts of whether we should study the fee, as I understood it, studying the fee and coming up with recommendations, we have no problem with. And if the city manager has an idea of folding into more comprehensive, again, I would support that and be happy to engage in that conversation. We'd see what revenue that is, and we need to identify how that would impact revenue, and if there's any choices we need to make as an organization.
Okay, that makes sense.
And Councilmember, I think we can do that number 1 fairly quickly, and we can come back in early fall or in the fall timeframe and let you know what the impact is and come up with some ideas about how we could do that. Just so, but we'll disclose what the impact is and how we might be able to work that out. We would not need to wait for mid-year or the study session for that piece. We could do that right in the fall.
Okay, great.
And
Yeah,
yes.
I guess that makes sense. You guys want to explore it, see how it may impact the department. So happy to move forward on that.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember. Councilmember Foley.
Thank you. I have some questions about the joint memo from Torres, Davis, Ortiz, Duan, and Batra regarding the items that are being used to offset the funding of Med 30, specifically the radio replacements. We are scheduled to replace all of our radios. These are the radios, I'm assuming, maybe who can talk to us about the radios? It's Matt. These are the radios that are part of the interoperability group that allows us to communicate with radios throughout the county. Is that these or these different radios that we're talking
These
about?
are the same radios, yes. They would pull off, as I believe the recommendation was 55 of those that are cycled, and we would put them off for a later time. And so we'd have to identify if those, I asked staff if there's any criticality of those particular 55, and the answer was no, that doesn't put us off in terms of anything, but in terms of we have a replacement cycle, these 55 are part of our continued replacement cycle. We had discussed before, one of the larger budget allocations was to keep up with what's going on as they expire out in terms of their ongoing support. My understanding is these 55 are not part of that. They're just part of our larger replacement. As we always have to replace our radios as we go because they're critical for our public safety staff members. This is just part of the regular replacement cycle.
Okay, so I sit on the SVR-IA board.
Yes.
And we talked about, just in our last meeting, about all the radios that need to be replaced in San Jose's share.
Yes.
Is that part of this?
I don't believe this particular 55 is part of that share. We have a larger allocation that we are doing for that share.
Okay, so you're comfortable with us not funding the replacement of those 55? It won't affect our operations at all?
Comfortability and whether I would like that are two different things, and so if that's the direction of council, I don't think it's a criticality that we have to have those 55 in terms of maintaining our SVRA partnership.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. I am a little concerned about this memo, just because, again, I feel like we're playing with the numbers, and the numbers have been, we've been working with them for months and come up with a good set of proposals that staff is recommending and that we're getting ready to approve, and now we're piecemealing the budget. And I'm a little concerned that the trade-offs may not be as thoughtful or as effective as we want them to be. For example, account receivable staffing. I don't know how important that is, but it seems to me that accounts receivable, they're the ones who are bringing money in. So we would want accounts receivable staffing to be in existence. Same thing with information technology. I understand it's a vacant position, but that doesn't mean it's not an important, critical position. The vehicle replacement, we have to replace those as well. So I'm hesitating on this, and to reduce then we're reducing the deficit by 500,000. That's great, but we're not. We're asking staff to reduce the reserve on the deficit. So we're spending a lot of money, we're not saving it all. So I can't accept this memo, so I'm going to vote no. That's it for me.
Thanks, Councilmember. I also have concerns about the items we'd be cutting. I don't think we have a great understanding of the impact. We have worked so hard to rebuild our IT department. We have direction in the June message and the budget we're about to approve that relies on us being able to increase our investments in information technology. We can defer replacing capital vehicles and radios, but that's been our habit as a city for a long time, and we have a huge accumulated debt in terms of deferred maintenance and capital replacement. And the part that concerns me the most, as the city manager pointed out, is to reduce the deficit reserve and then bake in a $500,000 deficit going in an ongoing way after the next year is something I have a challenge with. I do support the direction as modified in the other memo for the dog and cat license and then the broader study. I certainly support that, but I have real concerns about this. It seems to me an alternative, and it's not something I would want to do, but another approach here could be to defer for another year this question of the substitution, because Jennifer, I don't know if you or someone else could explain the move we're trying to make to get the 6th Battalion chief and how the administration is thinking about it. So maybe we just defer that for a year.
Because you could undo that, the add of the battalion and the cut of Med 30, and that would keep that within balance. But I know that that 6th Battalion is something that the chiefs talked to us a lot about.
Definitely something we want.
Yeah, we definitely would like to do that because of the added fire stations and things like that, and for span of control. And those are high-level positions, but I'm going to let the chief talk about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think from a standpoint of what motivates our proposal for the 6th Battalion, two issues. One I call my keep me up at night motivation, which is when it comes to the highest risk assumed on the emergency or fire ground, we have a risk management model that says that we will risk our lives to save savable lives. In those critical moments where staff is taking on the highest risk, command and control is extremely critical to support scene safety because you become very hyper-focused on task and you need someone to be hyper-focused on situational awareness and overall command and control. At this point in time, the geography of the city and the addition of new stations, increased call volume, and increasing traffic patterns, the response time for battalion chiefs right now is extensive, and there's a lot of moments where our crews have to operate independently without that command and control, and so that is what makes it a pressing matter for the fire department.
Thanks, Chief. And I certainly support that move. I think the administration's approach here, which is to prioritize increased span of control and then give us 6 months to have a little bit of extra capacity to then evaluate, makes sense. I guess my concern is rather than open up a deficit and cut other things from the budget that we, without really deeply understanding what those cuts mean, and impacting various departments, I'd prefer to defer the decision a year if we have to, rather than make some trade-offs that I'm not even sure we fully understand, and I have some concerns about. Councilmember Cohen?
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that. I'm going to ask a question again on MBA 60. Maybe it's because we're into our 14th hour of this in the last 2 days, but I feel like I'm having trouble understanding exactly what MBA 60 does as far as this transitional period. I mean, so just explain it to me one more time. I don't know who's going to explain it, but somebody can explain it one more time.
Jim, go ahead, and it is definitely, it's written in there, well, I'm not sure what page, Jim.
It's
Just
4-ish, maybe?
maybe 4, yes, it's on page 4 of it. But Jim, why don't you go ahead and do a deeper dive on exactly what we're recommending here?
Yeah, and I can just, when I read it. So what MBA 60 just restates that the proposed budget includes that elimination of those 3 fire captain positions currently assigned to the EMS field coordinator function, which is Med 30. As that fire department is reallocating work responsibilities also with the addition of the 6th Battalion and the 3.0 new battalion chief positions that would be added. That's what's going on in the proposed budget. The fire department is confident in the ability to transition those Med 30 duties across a wider range of personnel. What they are recommending is a 6-month period for an additional captain on standby for the department infection control officer function. And so that function will be funded with MBA 60 for a period of six months. To the extent that standby position is needed to continue as the fire department still works through that transitionary period, we would make sure to bring forward a budget adjustment to allow that to continue on through the rest of the fiscal year. So I think we'll keep monitoring that. So what MBA 60 does is sort of allows some one-time funding to fund that department infection control position at a standby level through the first 6 months of the year, and we will continue to evaluate that. If we need to bring forward an extension, we will do so.
Okay, thank you. And the way I looked at this, and I was skeptical of the cut of the Med 30 position. I mean, when I read about it and heard about it and talked to folks, I mean, it was not something that I, felt great about. On the other hand, this was clearly a method of getting that 6th Battalion chief without extra cost to the city. And so the real issue here is, do we add funding to the fire department, or do we try to balance it as we make the change? And, I was erring on the side of trusting our fire chief about which position was most important to the department. And so ultimately, I think the decision for this council in my mind is more one of, do we say we don't really want to make this change, we think Med 30 is more important than the 6th Battalion chief, at least for now, or do we take the recommendation? But I didn't necessarily think that the third option of adding the battalion chiefs and continuing Med 30 and therefore adding more money to the overall cost of the fire department was one of the options, which I think is what this memo is proposing. So that's kind of where I was falling on this. It's certainly a reasonable discussion as to whether Med 30 is more important or not than the battalion chiefs, but I think we've heard that the chief himself is recommending that this is the better option. So that's where I was falling on it.
Thanks, Councilmember. Councilor Davis?
Thank you. I really appreciate the additional explanation on MBA 60. And so I just want to make sure I completely understand. I know you've said it already twice, Jim, but the one-time funding of $125K is to get us through basically 6 months out of the fiscal year for a transition period. And then you'll evaluate as necessary. You don't need extra direction from us. You'll evaluate and come back to us if they need more transition time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I appreciate that extra clarification, so I'm okay with that, and I'm wondering if the maker of the motion would be willing to pull that part of our memo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know if it's okay with, I don't remember who seconded.
Councilmember Duan.
That pulls the second.
I second
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, it pulls.
The second memo, or the one that is not the dog and
Not
cat
the dog and cat
license
memo,
fee
yes.
memo, we'd pull the other.
Yes.
Okay, and the second was? Councilor Dewan.
Yeah, it was the second was
Councilor Dewan, do you accept that friendly amendment?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. That I do have the confidence with our fire chief. I just disagree with, the issues that we have. I just want to make sure what is best for our firefighter in our department. And I thank you, the fire chief, for answering the question.
Thank you, Council Member. Okay. Councilor Candelas.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the conversation and the exchange of ideas or opportunities for Med 30 or the 6th Battalion. I've heard from our local on the need that they have. Councilmember Dewan was very, very passionate about this earlier, and so I worry that if we are adding a 6th Battalion, we are losing Med 30, which we all agree. I know in our study session we agreed on the necessity for Med 30. So now I'm wondering if there is an opportunity for a temporary or maybe a one-time allocation while the department adjusts, because in my conversations with the chief, this 6-month runway on those on the infectious disease expert. It doesn't sound too clear, but if maybe we can do, I understand the concern not to obligate us for a long-term basis, but rather than get rid of it and say, oh, we're not doing Med 30, why don't we find somewhere in the middle where we can do a one-time allocation of the Med 30 using the items described in the memorandum written by my colleagues, Davis, Batra, Duan, and Ortiz, so we can have maybe a 1-year transition period while we figure out what works and what doesn't work, instead of saying, oh, in 6 months, if it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll come back to you. Because I think that's, we have the potential to put, lives at risk, and that's what I don't want to do. And so, I would ask for a friendly amendment, if you will. And so I'm going to try to piecemeal this as I go, because I think we should at least try to fund it on a 1-year basis while we transition to a 6th Battalion, instead of getting rid of Med 30 completely and saying thank you but no thank you. So if the maker of the motion would accept my amendment or my friendly amendment, I'd be grateful. If that makes sense. Does it?
Jim, what do you think of? What do you think about that?
Maybe Jim, I'll pipe in. I think what as an alternative is that you could take the items A through E, and where there's staffing positions, I wouldn't recommend a year because I think the chief believes that we can get this, in better, in same or better shape of a service delivery. Is you could take the positions, hold them vacant for a year, not for a year, for 6 months, and then cut the radio replacements and general vehicle replacement in half. So hold them all vacant for half a year, which would provide the funding, and then you're not touching the future deficit reserve at this point. So you got a one-time way of funding the Med 30 for 6 months, and then we could evaluate that. I think is another alternative, but I would hesitate to do that for a year, given some of these, the IT staffing and some other things, and the fact that we think that that may not be the most efficient use of funds if we're successful in transitioning these jobs to other places in the department. Does that make sense to you, Jim?
Yes, so holding some of those positions vacant to generate savings for a 6-month period,
Which would
essentially.
fund keeping the fire captains for 6 months, and then we come back with evaluation. That's another alternative.
I think
that you could that would be fair to consider without undermining the original proposal that we're trying to accomplish, and giving more runway. It gives it even more runway than our proposal, and you could even use and so that's another idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I understand this. So we would review at the mid-year budget whether that change is working and not, and maybe continue it funding in January to see if we need more time than the 6 months. Is that correct?
Sure. Yes.
Jennifer?
So that would be what would be contemplated. So we would report out under our proposal or this proposal anyway to let you know how it's going.
Okay.
I would recommend us keeping that $125,000 that's in our proposal, because if in that second 6 months we can just, if we need that for the infectious control position, we still have that money set aside. So I wouldn't make that one go away. I would keep this self-contained with this and just delay hiring of those positions and let us do the evaluation, let you know how the service is going.
Yeah, so long as it comes back in the mid-year for us to have this conversation, I'm okay
It would
with
have to. It would have to.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, because we would not be cutting. These would only have a vacancy for 6 months until about mid-year or so.
Thank you for helping me through that, Jennifer.
Jennifer, would it be, we haven't built the 2 new station yet, so we can still operate within the parameter that we have now, defer the battalion chief, new battalion chief.
But I think the point of what we're trying to do is get them on board and hired so we can start the transition of these duties. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chief. Then we can evaluate if we can do without Med 30, which is what we're contemplating. That's what we're contemplating. So is that correct, Chief? Because I think the alternative, what the council members is saying is, can we defer the add for 6 months of the BAT chiefs, keep these positions on for 6 months, but then I don't think we're having an opportunity to really evaluate the transition of the duties.
Yeah, I think it would be the same question at a different point in time, because we'd be closing one service and opening a new one. Certainly from a timing perspective, it would take us a little while to stand up. It would take us more like 3 months to stand up the battalion to do the promotions and all that. So we do have that 3-month wiggle room, so about a quarter. And I had already planned in that interim to have some phase out time, so it wouldn't be an abrupt stop of Med 30 on July 1. It would actually be more in the fall, when I was sure that I had all the planning completed.
And so I think the point of us adding in that, keeping the captain for 6 months with $125,000 on the standby, or this other idea, is to give us that overlap.
Extra runway.
That's
to give us that. That's exactly. Thank you for articulating my point. But to finish it off, it's to give us that runway, council, to the makers of the motion, to give us that runway and give us that more time to do that. That's. Would you be open to that?
Yeah, but so it's to include the battalion chiefs, 6 battalion chiefs, plus M30 for
Correct.
half a year.
Correct.
Councilmember
The
Duan?
bat chiefs would be ongoing in this budget, and it would
Okay.
be the captains with the reduction
Yeah,
of the items for 6 months.
Yes, I'm okay that
Yes.
we go for 6 months and then we reassess.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. So the items, not the future deficit reserve.
Yeah,
Just
that's-
the items for 6 months would basically be kept vacant or expenditures would be deferred.
Yes,
It
that's
advises
correct.
us-
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable move. Okay, so that has been accepted by the maker of the motion and the seconder. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Some good creative problem solving on the dais. Okay, we're close. Councilor Torres, I had your name still up. Did you have anything else? Okay. Great. Okay, we have a motion. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? All right, Tony, let's vote.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Torres,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Davis.
Yes.
Doan,
Aye.
Dwan, sorry, Candelas,
Yes.
Foley,
Aye.
Batra,
I'm alone in the room.
Kamei,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye. All right. We have a budget. Thanks, everybody. Thank you again, Jim and the budget team, and Stephen Kane's on my team. That's exciting. Well done, everyone. Okay, we are on to item 3.7. Public hearing on recording liens on properties for the reimbursement of the cost of sidewalk repairs. And do we have any presentation from staff? Yes. A
Yes,
brief
Mayor, we're
presentation.
going to try to do a very brief presentation of background
We'd
to this
certainly
item.
appreciate that.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, members of the public. My name is Rick Bruno. I'm the Director of Finance. Today, joined with me is John Risto, Director of Transportation, Eric Hahn from the Transportation Department, and John Kashmanian, Deputy Director in the Finance Department. John and John will present a short presentation, but I'll kick it off with just a few comments. So the lien action before you today is the last step to recover costs the city has paid to contractors with general fund dollars to perform sidewalk repair work. Staff in the Department of Transportation and Finance Department work really hard to provide property owners with information about the financial hardship program and alternative payment arrangements to avoid the lien process. Since March, when the public hearing was set, the count of properties subject to lien has reduced by a third, with a number of property owners taking advantage of the financial hardship program and being placed on payment plans. I'll turn the presentation over to John Risto.
Thank you, Rick. John Risso, Director of Transportation. We're going to do a short presentation to give a little background of what we do and why we do it for the sidewalk repairs. Thanks. The slides up there giving a visual representation of what we look for sidewalk repairs. I'll let you look at those. Probably the most significant one is the uplift that's on the far left. And we do that through an inspection of our teams as they are made aware of sidewalk problems. And just to remind council that we place the responsibility of the sidewalks maintenance and repair on the adjacent property owner, and that's based in both our municipal code and streets and highways code, the state law. We do about 5,000 sidewalk repairs a year. 2/3 of those are done by the property owner once we make them aware of that repair needed, and then about 1/3 is done by our teams using a contractor. Why we're here is when a property owner that has asked us to do the work has not responded to our invoices. That's why we're here, is for the lien hearings that the council will consider for this. So that's the reason for this. So you can see the numbers of repairs we do. Most of them are done very successfully by property owners. We then, when they don't want to do it, we step in and do the work. Most often they pay us those invoices. When they don't, that's what we're here for. And we do have a very robust financial hardship program that allows income-based assistance for property owners and homeowners that need some help, all the way down to paying all of it if they qualify for that hardship. We usually do 100 or so, maybe 120 different hardship cases a year. We use up all the funds most of the time on an annual basis that the council approves for that budget. I think I'm going to turn it back to John now. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor Mahan, council members, and members of the public. I'm John Kachmanian, Deputy Director of Finance, Revenue Management. This slide goes into more detail about the typical sidewalk lien process and schedule. The lien cycle generally spans 1 year from August to August. Between August and October, the city issues 3 repair notices, conducts outreach about the sidewalk repair financial hardship program, and performs sidewalk repairs. Between November and March, the Department of Transportation issues sidewalk repair invoices and coordinates with finance to send up to 3 late notices for unpaid invoices. The lien process commenced on March 28th with council's approval to set a lien public hearing date of June 13th. In April, the Department of Transportation sent 2 notices of intent to lien and held an administrative conference for delinquent property owners. Upon conclusion of today's public hearing and following council's approval of staff's recommendations, a special assessment would be placed on the property tax bill of delinquent property owners to recover sidewalk repair costs. On March 28th, City Council approved a memorandum which set a June 13th public hearing date to recover unpaid sidewalk repairs by recording liens. On April 4th and again on April 11th, the Department of Transportation mailed notices to property owners who were in default of paying for their sidewalk repairs. These notices contained information on the April 25th administrative conference, which provided an opportunity for property owners to discuss their delinquent balances. In addition, the notices announced the scheduled June 13th public hearing date to record liens on any property owners with remaining unpaid balances. Here is a heat map of San Jose by district showing the delinquent sidewalk repair invoices with pending liens. As of May 1st, the date of the director's report, these invoices had an average balance of $2,100, an average age of just over 2 years, and a total outstanding balance of approximately $256,000. In conclusion, staff recommends that council conduct a public hearing on recording liens on properties for the reimbursement of the cost of sidewalk repairs, adopt a resolution confirming the report from the Director of Finance concerning the delinquent sidewalk repair costs and the assessments contained in the report, and direct the recording of liens and the placement of charges as set forth therein on the 2023-2024 Santa Clara County Secured Property Tax Bill for the cost of sidewalk repairs. Thank you.
And we're available for questions.
Great, thank you all for that presentation. Let's go to public comment.
I have a speaker card with no name, but the person says they're representing their dad. So if you submitted a card for item 3.7 and you're still here, please come on down. I don't see movement, so I'm going to go online to Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I got 3 words for you. Sal si puedes. No sidewalks for decades. Anyways, what I'd like to do is racial equity needs to be instituted in this particular policy. And here's why. Is sal si puedes. There was a history of neglect from this city. And so all of those bills that District 5 owes, I suggest that they get canceled. In full, the entire debt canceled because of that racial and of having to do without sidewalks for that many decades. Secondly, is that Councilman Morales and myself had both had the same consternation at the fact that you, when you look at the allocations as to who gets the work done first, it's always it just happens to be Rose Garden, Willow Glen, Cambrian, Almaden Valley. No. We need to stop that. We need to stop. And what we need to do is prioritize those neighborhoods that have historically been neglected. Now, either you're going to institute racial equity or get rid of the office, but quit conning the people. Quit conning them. I'm tired of your lying. So what you do is you start instituting racial equity within the context of sidewalks. Because my parents and all the Chicanos on the east side of San Jose, in Sasapuedes, that was one of the primary issues with that, because there was no drainage. It was mud. That's why they called it Sasapuedes. Get out if you can, because you got stuck.
Tamara?
Hi there. I was just gonna piggyback also on Paul. We do need to have better sidewalks in the neighborhoods. We have, in the problem that we had when they did North Capitol, as they were doing like repairs to the overall area due to the fact that we were having BART coming in and new development. They started doing sidewalk repairs, but they did not notify everyone. And we already have crosswalks that the beacons aren't properly working, and we have people with mobility impairments, and it's necessary to have proper sidewalks. And even when I canvassed in the past, I would walk those sidewalks and I would look down. I would see if people would be able to properly cross, if crosswalks were marked, if the sidewalks didn't have indentations. And many of the trees that were planted by the city are the ones that are causing the damage to the sidewalks. And then it becomes the responsibility of property owners to make some repairs, while really it should be part of the city to take care of that. It's important that we properly notify and that we properly let people know and create clear markings for detours that people that are walking that can't walk, or that are in like wheelchairs, so that they're not using the bike lanes, because North Capitol and places like that are already dangerous. We need to do the right thing for people that have those needs. We need to have proper sidewalks for everyone. We cannot have people walking on the streets, even whether unincorporated or corporated areas. So that's about it. Thank you very much.
Back to council.
Thank you. All right. Turn to my colleagues. Councilor Jimenez.
Yeah, just a question. Looking at the memo on page, actually, I don't see a page number. The section where it talks about the financial hardship assistance program. So the page following that, it goes into another page. Talks about from July 2022 to May 9, 2023. And it goes over 89 properties at an approximate cost of $390. It goes on to say that the annual allocation for sidewalk repair financial hardship program is $429. What I'm curious about is if you only reuse $390, you allocated $429. Does that just roll over to the other year, or does that zero out and then you add another $429? Does that make sense?
Well, we are not, just John Rusto again, to answer that question, we don't get to roll over, but we do go back to budgets during the year if we need some more, to request an additional budget, if that hardship program requires more. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah. So is $429 the amount that's currently, that's how much you all get every single year?
Yeah,
right?
that's
Okay.
roughly the amount.
So you use it all up, or you don't? You just get $429
We usually
again
use
next
it
year?
up, and then if we need, if it is exhausted during that year, we'll go and ask for an additional.
Okay. How often is the case that you ask for an addition? Is that? Just curious.
Last year, we needed an additional 100,000. I don't think it's quite that much every year, but.
All right. And then the financial hardship assistance program, So the breakdown of the guidelines, that's for the owner of the property, right? So if I'm renting a property, that doesn't apply to me. It applies to the owner of the property. Okay, all right. And then, I don't know what the solution is. I think it probably requires a broader conversation, and I suspect, having been on the council about 6.5 years, almost 7 years, I'm sure this has probably come up in the past, so I'm not going to dig into this any more than just simply to point out, as with most things that we deal with in the city, there are certain issues that seem to sort of sit in certain parts of the city, if you will, and so I couldn't help but look at the map on slide 8, for example, and just look at most of the dots and the places seem to be in the districts of the city that maybe have most, challenging circumstances related to like people, being lower socioeconomic status or maybe aren't making enough money. And so I just wanted to point that out. I don't know what the solution is or what that indicates, but I'd be curious if you have any general thoughts of that. So if you look at it, I mean, you see the line running from the number 4 all the way down to the base of District 10. I mean, most of the dots, right, of the plots are sort of to the east of that. A lot of the concentration in District 5, obviously, District 3, District 7, near my district and District 7, which is obviously, if you're familiar with the area, it's known as a place where, a lot of folks are probably not doing as well as other parts of Silicon Valley. But anyway, do you have any thoughts? I don't know if there's...
Well, Councilmember, you're right. It comes up every year in this time because many cities do put the responsibility on adjacent homeowners.
Yeah.
That's still a hard concept to get past, so that's number one.
Right.
Number two, it is true that there is, when we're coming here for these liens, that it probably follows this same pattern every year. I don't think we've ever mapped it before, so this might be the first time we've ever mapped it, just to get that answer.
Okay.
And number three, maybe this goes back in history. The city used to have a grant program where we would put funding in to help with that problem.
Okay.
I think that went away maybe 10 years ago or something. So I don't know that it ever paid 100%, but it allowed for property owners to apply for an amount of money that would reduce or cover a large share of what that was. So that we don't have that. We have the hardship program, but it was more robust with a grant program.
Okay, and then the other question I had is actually for Vice Mayor Kamei. Did you submit a BD tied to covering some sidewalk repair costs? Or am I thought I saw something.
It wasn't for repair costs. It was for putting sidewalks where there had not been sidewalks before.
I understand. Okay, all right. Sorry, I was gonna, assuming she answered it differently, I would have asked you, what do you hope to glean from that? But she's obviously different topic. So anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll move approval of the report.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. I heard Councilmember Foley with the second, but I'm going to Councilmember Dewan for the next question and comment. Councilmember?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, John, and team for the report. My understanding that you have 122 residents that is, not paying their bill on this. Am I correct? 122, right? Out of the 122, I believe 89 was on the forgiveness program, in a sense. 89. I thought I read the number as 89.
The 89 was separate from this, so 89 people received assistance and avoided having to be placed on liens.
Okay. So the 122, since you put out this report, so 37, 41, 54, 56, about 44 accounts have kind of somewhat settled.
So the report was as of May 1st. That was where the 122 number came from, and we reran the numbers just as of yesterday, and we have 105 liens right now, so it went down by 17.
Oh, wow, okay. And has you reach out to all those residents and give them the option to see if they qualify for, some type of reimbursement or complete forgiveness in multiple languages?
Yes. We have Department of Transportation repair notices and then Department of Finance invoices sent out in English with translations for Spanish and Vietnamese with the translated sentence asking them to call our language assistance line if they need assistance with translation.
Perfect, thank you. And if some of those residents are willing to pay the cost, would you defer the extra fee because they're late?
Late charges.
I think it was like $100 and some addition dollars.
Councilmember, can you confirm timing of when they would make payment? Are you asking if they made payment now or before we lien?
Yes, before you go to lien, yes.
I believe there's the lien fee has been is part of the report, but we have 5 days before it becomes final after this action. So if we receive payment within the next 5 days, the lien fee would not be part of, it would not go forward with the lien. So they would save on that lien fee.
Okay, and would you forgive the $128 administration fees as well?
I don't think, we could, okay, yes, we can waive that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Foley.
Okay, I'm going to go in the weeds a little bit on this lien. So the lien's recorded against the property, right?
Correct.
So the $125, is that a recording fee? I'm sorry, what? What's the amount? I'm looking over my shoulder.
$128.25.
I'm looking over at my neighbor's work. Is that a recording?
No, that is not a recording fee.
Okay.
Of the county. That is part of our fees and charges for administrating and collecting the fee.
Okay, so they're given a notice, they're given plenty of time to pay the fee before it's liened against their property. Then the lien that's against their property, does that accrue interest?
No, once the lien is placed, it will stay at the amount that we, that it's liened on the property until it goes to the property tax this coming fall and next year. It will be placed on their property tax. They make payments there. If there is a sale of the property before that time, then it would go through the escrow and be paid off as part of the sale transaction.
Okay, I think you just answered my second question. So if normally a lien would be paid through escrow through a sale transaction or a refinance, it'd have to be taken care of at that point. But did you just say that it gets added to the property taxes?
Correct.
And in the next property tax cycle?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, that helps.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Okay, let's see other hands. We have a motion and a second. Let's vote.
Yes.
I'm going to say it again so the microphone picks it up. Jimenez?
Yes.
Torres?
Yes.
Cohen?
Aye.
Ortiz?
Aye.
Davis?
Yes.
Dwan?
Aye.
Candelas?
Yes.
Foley?
Aye.
Batra?
I'm still lonely, and I say yes.
Thank you. Kamei?
Aye.
Mahan?
Aye.
Motion passes.
A little comic relief after the days we've had. Welcome. Thank you, Councilmember. Okay. Thank you. We are on to item 4.1, which will be heard concurrently with item 10.3. There is a joint presentation. We will vote on them separately, but the presentation and discussion and public comment will be on both items.
Wait, we just announced 4.1 and 10.3 together, but the presentation is showing 10.2?
Yeah, that's the wrong one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment to switch the presentation. That looks better. Okay, here we go. And is it Wendy Martino who's kicking us off here? Feel free to get started.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. My name's Wendy Salazzi, and I'm the Division Manager in the Police Department's Division of Cannabis Regulation. With me today is Martina Davis, Division Manager in Planning, Building, Code Enforcement, and Victor Farley from the Office of Economic Development and Cultural Affairs. And also with me today is the Assistant Chief, Paul Joseph. The initial cannabis land use and regulatory program was approved by City Council in 2014, and we've been back numerous times to City Council with changes over the years to enhance and expand what's allowed in San Jose. Most recently, in February 2022, City Council approved updates to Title 6 and 20 of the Muni Code and allowed businesses to locate in commercial zoning districts, modified distance requirements to sensitive uses. New or relocated storefronts are prohibited from opening in Council District 7, and it allows the existing 16 registered cannabis businesses to open a second retail storefront location, and then we're allowing up to 10 new equity-owned retail businesses, only 5 of which may be retail storefront. Sorry. In November 2022, City Council directed staff to make further updates to our zoning code, and so I'll turn it over to Martina to go over those specific changes.
So the ordinance adopted by Council in February 2022 had a main goal of allowing the industry to expand and expand to commercial areas. And a part of the goal was to allow them to start to move their retail out of Council District 7. Largely, it's where a lot of them are. What we proposed at that time, we adjusted some of those distance requirements. We thought we hit something that worked. We had done a mapping exercise. We found what we thought was over 1,000 eligible locations. And so we thought we were going to have a successful ordinance and successful program, and unfortunately that did not happen. We found a couple issues. First off, that we had made some errors in our initial mapping exercise. There was a lot more sensitive uses than we were aware of, particularly, I would say, daycare centers. And so when the industry started looking after February, they were just encountering a lot of challenges with those sites we thought would be available to them. The other challenge that they've found is unique to their industry, being federally illegal. To make a long story short, there's a lot of property owners that are unwilling or unable to lease to them, so it really shrinks their available sites. That's what led to this council direction that we were given back in November, which was to modify some of those distance requirements to sensitive uses. I'll just talk about that in a second. Remove the overlay for the higher crime police beat. That was something that we didn't find was effective or made a lot of sense when we started really using it. Eliminate distance requirements between the storefronts, and then propose a concentration standard. So just as a reminder, this is what was adopted in February. You can see the largest distances are to those sensitive uses that involve children. And I've highlighted the changes. So first off would be parks, rec centers, community centers, libraries would go down where it does apply to 500 feet measured from the property line. Schools, daycare centers, or youth centers, which are youth-oriented businesses, would change from 1,000 feet in most cases to a new dual measurement where it would be 500 feet from the property line or a 1,000-foot path of travel, so from the public entrance of the cannabis business to the public entrance of the school, daycare center, et cetera. They would need to show they conform with both, so effectively the more restrictive would apply, and we do think that would be the 500 feet. And then I'll end with our concentration standard. So initially Council had adopted a 500 or 1,000-foot path of travel distance between the retail storefronts. As part of that November direction, they directed us to go ahead and remove that strict distance requirement and propose something to address concentration. We looked at a number of options. We've evaluated this a few times. And where we landed was borrowing something from how we look at off-sale of alcohol, which is no more than 4 cannabis retail storefronts within a 1,000-foot radius. We do think that this has a balance between ensuring that we don't have a super concentration of these businesses, but also gives that flexibility for them to find a site given some of those challenges that they've encountered. And so in summary, as I said, unfortunately, I hate to say this, the ordinance that we brought to you in February just wasn't successful. It did not meet that goal of allowing our industry to move to retail areas. And we do agree with council and feel strongly that changes do need to be made if we are going to facilitate this industry relocating outside of our industrial districts into our commercial districts for retail. And I will pass it back to Wendy to discuss the Title VI changes.
All right, instead of requiring an external audit on an annual basis, staff is proposing changing the audit requirement to an as-needed basis, contingent on elevated risks such as tax findings or improper internal controls. Staff is also proposing changes to update and clarify the Muni Code with respect to certain definitions and general provisions, and to bring some things in alignment with state regulations. And we're going to add and update some fines for violations through this as well.
Thank you, Wendy. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. The Cannabis Equity Pilot Program was part of the Cannabis Equity Assessment that City Council approved in February 2022. You approved that and you established the program, and you established the principle that 10 new registrations will be awarded to businesses that completed satisfactorily the program that was to be defined. The Office of Economic Development, closely with the Police Department and the Office of Racial Equity, designed, procured, negotiated, managed, and in May of this year launched the Academy. In parallel with that, we designed and made public an application process for residents of the city, and over 80 people completed that initial expression of interest in the fall of 2022. And then we subsequently designed a detailed online application form from which 24 residents completed by May 15th, and a further resident has now completed and joined. So we have 25 residents on program, attending lectures, classes, and their one-to-one mentoring. I'd like to give a personal shout out to a colleague of mine in the Office of Economic Development, Nguyen Pham, whose outreach with residents in the city has been outstanding throughout, and has spent many hours with individual residents, helping them to assist them with the information and the evidence that's required to enable them to complete the application process and meet the standards set by the police department. We are in a position now where we can run the program in full. The program will run to the end of June 2024, and we will accept an open access enrollment program that will run to January 2024, enabling any resident in the city that meets the requirements set within the Academy assessment to join the program. All lectures are live and subsequently recorded, so any participant can learn at their own pace, can listen multiple times to the lectures, and has the benefit of a one-to-one mentor throughout the program. Many of the speakers that have been commissioned within the program are Californian leading experts in all fields of capital raising, private equity, finance, legal, property. And so I'm very pleased to report to you that the progress we've made over the course of the past 3 to 4 months has enabled us to be operational. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, staff recommends approving an ordinance amending Chapter 6.88, adopting a resolution amending the administrative citation schedule of fines, and accepting staff's update on the Cannabis Equity Pilot Program.
Non-item 10.3, staff recommends adopting a resolution approving the Cannabis Business Ordinance Update Addendum and adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 20.80 of Title 20 of the Municipal Code to make modifications as described on the slide to the cannabis ordinance. And with that, we are finished with our presentation and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you all very much. Tony, do we have public comment?
I have Fernando Alvarez in person. And after Fernando, I have Tamara online.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, thank you. It's good to see this report. I've been following the cannabis industry since 2014. The regulations, creating a cannabis equity assistance program, looking at the rules to allow new dispensaries, all great stuff. And it was actually that kind of forward thinking and innovative progress that I found in my company, Vapor Tent Lounges, here in San Jose in 2014. In 2018, I became the first business licensed in the state to host cannabis events. And after producing a number of private cannabis events in the city of San Jose from 2014 to 2017, San Francisco reached out to me, and I was actually able to work with them and create their cannabis event pilot program. I then went to Oxnard, California to create their cannabis pilot program. I then went to Stockton, California, which is my city of birth, created their cannabis event pilot program. Sacramento is submitting my proposal to their city council next month. And so although this is all great, and I love seeing the forward thinking and just progress in this cannabis event area, I believe that the city is missing out on a significant opportunity to support our small businesses, our local arts community, and that's to allow for state licensed social consumption events in our city. Now, when I say cannabis events, I'm not talking about the stigmatized, FestCon expos. I'm talking about small scale events. Think of it as like alfresco dining meets cannabis and state regulations. And we do this at our art galleries, at our museums, at our movie theaters. These are the exact same programs that I'm developing in other cities. But the entire vision and program that I created was to do this here in my home of San Jose. And so I just asked the city council to, as we continue to look at these and amend these ordinances, to not forget the cannabis event organizer license, because the person sitting in front of you has demonstrated leadership in this space. I'm on my 5th city of getting this done, but again, the whole program was to do it here in my home city of San Jose. Thank you again. My name is Fernando Alvarez, the founder of Vapor Tent Lounges.
Thank you.
State licensed cannabis event organizer. Thank you.
Tamara, followed by Sean.
Good afternoon. I have been following the cannabis industry as well because I'm involved with blockchain technology, and I have been wanting to do like farm to table stuff so that we know exactly where things are coming from, how they're traced, whether there are patents and such for specific issues. I have also met different individuals that are having challenges hosting events, even if they're private. I know of certain agencies that have private events because they are necessary to individuals that are suffering from terminal illnesses such as HIV, cancer, and they are very beneficial for those individuals. We need to have more of that, especially if they're private events. They would be encourageable, because sometimes my concern would be that, while individuals are, whether they're consuming marijuana as legal as it is, sometimes it's in front of children, and that is a concern because of the smell, the blowover, and all of those things. So it's just something that we do have to be mindful, but it's important to have places like that. Like when we had the Church of Cannabis, that was an amazing place. And it was like a nonprofit, because we need to have such places that are nonprofits, that are specific locations that can provide assistance to individuals. It's been, people that consume marijuana are frowned upon, even when they need to use it for health benefits. So it's not always just about fun and games, but it's also about a business that's necessary. And it's definitely bringing more finances in its allowing the economy in San Jose to grow. Thank you.
Sean, followed by Walter.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Sean Cali-Rye. In business and in life, many things are hard, and I want to point out a couple of things in particular. One is having the courage to start something, and the second is having the patience and the strength to see it through to the end. In 2019, Councilmember Pam Foley proposed cannabis rezoning and regulatory changes to combat the illegal cannabis market, meet the consumer demand, which has doubled since the inception of the cannabis program, assist the small businesses, and increase the tax revenue to the city. All of this focused on promoting the larger vision of carrying out the will and the spirit of the voters when they passed Proposition 64 in November of 2016. Since this was made by the City Council as the #1 priority of 2019, we've had a global pandemic, economic turmoil, and unforeseen delays. Finally, after 4 years, an incredible effort from Councilmember Foley, her staff, Kyle, Jack, and even Michael Lomeo when he worked for Pam, prior council members Jones, Perales, Carrasco, Esparza, and Arenas, when they were all here, they definitely did all the heavy lifting. And I wish to thank Councilmember Foley in particular for her leadership on this issue, on having the endurance and following this all the way through to the end. There's always going to be more policy changes that will come, but this has been 4 years in the coming. And I want to thank the council members on the memo also and encourage the rest of your colleagues to support Councilmember Foley's memorandum and that of her colleagues this evening. Thank you.
Walter.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Council and staff. This academy is great. First of all, I wasn't really that aware of it, but I'm with the Minority Business Consortium at this moment. And what we do is we advocate for small women, minority-owned business, LGBTQ, and other underrepresented businesses. We've had several people come to us and ask and show great interest in opening cannabis businesses. And then I've heard from some people that a lot of people come through this program, they open their business and their business fails. And so, we're trying to get up to speed in terms of, how successful a lot of these businesses are, what the prerequisites are for them to succeed once they've gone through your academy. And some people just aren't good business people too. We do understand that. But I don't want to be able to be in a situation where we're recommending something like this to some people or to their businesses and they lose their livelihoods or whatever, because we aren't fully aware of the pitfalls in this business. And so, since you started your academy and you guys have trained people and started new businesses, I'm curious what the success rate is. And, and then for those businesses who don't succeed, do they have any other recourse? Thank you very much.
Back to council.
Thank you, Tony. And thanks to everybody who weighed in. Councilmember Foley?
This definitely has been a long haul from 2019 to today. I want to thank Martina and Wendy for hanging in there with us with all of our questions and concerns and our modifications and coming back to you, and you were always very willing to work with us and our staffs, and I really, truly appreciate that. Especially the last go-around was, we thought we were there, and then we had a few more things that we needed to bring in, so I'm really grateful for that. This cannabis has been legal for a while now in this state, but we've learned a lot over time too. At first, we had the restrictions of where they could be within the city of San Jose, and then we brought forward, as you said, ordinance last year to move the licenses around, or to be able to expand the licenses and then move the dispensaries to other parts of the city, so there wouldn't be this heavy concentration of cannabis dispensaries in District 7 in particular. The council member at the time, Maya Esparza, was very concerned about that. The importance of making sure that the legal cannabis industry thrives is really critical, and it's critical for a couple of reasons. And one is because it is a tax revenue for us. It generates decent income into our general fund. These are general fund dollars. But the second is that if we have a robust and vibrant, successful legal market, then it discourages the illicit market, and that's really what we need to stop. We need to make it not as easy for illicit vendors of cannabis to be out there selling. So the way we do that is that we make our businesses more accessible, easier to access. We review looking at fees and reducing the fees, which is part of the motion, part of what you're looking at already, and part of the motion that I'm going to make in a couple of minutes. We've already worked on zoning changes and things like that. We didn't complete them. We have a few more modifications today. And I'm actually really excited to bring this forth and hope this puts this conversation to rest for a little bit, but I can tell we're going to be talking probably about events soon. That's probably next on the list. And then the equity piece is really important as well. I do want to address a few concerns that occasionally we hear from the community, and one is about crime. There's concerns about these dispensaries and that there's a potential of crime increase, but really, Assistant Chief, maybe you can answer that question, but I don't hear that that's the case. Can you confirm that that's the case?
Councilmember, no, it really isn't. So last year, for example, we had 371,463 events or calls for service, and 61 of those occurred at one of the dispensaries. And just because the address of an event is at one of these locations doesn't necessarily mean the event is even tied to the dispensary necessarily. So no, I would say they're not right now generating calls for service or crime for us.
So you said over 300,000 calls and 61 to dispensaries.
Correct.
But may not be related to the business at all.
That's correct.
Thank you. That's fabulous. The other is concerns about public consumption near storefronts, and of course that's a concern, and there's bans on that and inability for people to access that. Of course, we have laws against underage users around the cities and our schools. And the other is access to children, and I'm very concerned about access to our children. But the distance requirements to our schools and parks are really conforming to what the state already has as far as its regulations for cannabis. So really what we're seeing today in our ordinance is aligning our regulations with the state's, which is really important. The state has its own set of regulations, and then the cannabis businesses have to adapt to ours and the state. So we're melding them a little bit and making it easier. Wouldn't you say that's the whole purpose of what we're doing?
Yeah.
Or one of the purposes of what we're doing?
Yes, yeah, the idea is to make it easier.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, I appreciate my colleagues who participated on this memo with me, Councilmember Jimenez, Torres, Cohen, and Ortiz. And so I'm taking this in two motions. Is that right? I have to move 4.1?
Yes, Councilmember, we need to vote separately, so we would take 4.1 first.
Okay, so I will approve the staff recommendation on 4.1 and include our memo, which removes already the external audit is removed per the staff recommendation, but our memo calls for that to be effective immediately. And then we ask staff to conduct a comprehensive review of a schedule of fines, which I know they're already working on, with the request that it come back to council, but after it goes to PISFIS first. And with that, I so move.
Second. Great. Thank you both. Councilmember Dewan.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, how do you enforce illegal sale within our city? I hear there's many vapor shops and illegal shops that sell marijuana without licensing, which causes this big problem in our city.
Councilmember, I mean, I think the illegal sales that are mostly competing with the established businesses are more purely illicit, either on the street or someone selling from their residence, or traditional kind of illicit drug sales. I'm not familiar exactly with other retail establishments selling vape marijuana under the in the manner in which you're describing. That's not a problem that we've been addressing frequently. Maybe Wendy has some more on that.
Yeah, if we are made aware of that, then we do coordinate with our code enforcement division of planning, building, code enforcement. And we also, there's I don't know if hotline's the right word, but there's an email that we send to the state. And so they take complaints there. So we'll send information to them if we're made aware of something that looks like it's illegal in our city. And so we'll bring the state in because they have an enforcement team that is spread out amongst the divisions of however they divide up the state. And so they'll come in and then they'll coordinate with us, and then we coordinate with patrol to make sure that there's someone with them when they go on site at these businesses. And then again, code enforcement usually accompanies them as well.
Thank you. And what are the consequences of fine for people who illegally sell it in their business or private individual out in the street?
In the fine schedule, there is, for if they're in violation of our chapter, that there is a citation for that for unregistered businesses. So code enforcement will issue that citation for that. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm talking about people, let's say a person standing in the corner having a pound worth of marijuana and selling it to other individual on the street. What would be the consequences and what would be the fine?
Councilmember, that type of situation would be an arrest. That would be a felony arrest.
Okay.
And that I think that's something outside of the regulation of these businesses.
Oh, okay.
But that would be a more traditional enforcement action.
Because I get a lot of complaints about people up in Communication Hill. A resident goes up there and see the beautiful view, and they're smoking pot in their car, and they're just sitting there, and then later on they drive. Is that a DUI? Am I correct on that?
It certainly could be if we can establish impairment. A DUI of marijuana is a little bit more of a challenging case to prove, but it can be done.
So, question to staff is San Jose fine for illegal cannabis comparable to other cities?
I believe that's the direction from the other memo for us to look at. It's across the board, honestly, statewide. We did start looking into it, and I mean, some of ours are right in line with others, and then some are higher, some are lower. Kind of just depends on what we're looking at. But we will come back with that through the Public Safety Finance Strategic Support Committee if that's approved tonight, that motion, and we'll have the better information then.
With the original motion from Councilmember Foley, accept a friendly amendment that we increase fine and for illegal businesses and individual that sell cannabis without license in the city of San Jose?
Councilmember, I actually don't consider that a friendly amendment because what we're looking at is the current fines to the legal businesses. They don't affect the illicit businesses, do they?
We do have fines in there for unregistered businesses, and so those tend to be much higher than what we would be fining our registered businesses.
Right,
So,
but you're bringing back all of these things. You're reviewing the fees and comparing them to other cities and other jurisdictions, and you'll bring it back to us. So, I understand where you're going, and I agree with that, but I think we've already given them the instructions to bring this back to council with the looking at the fees and fines and going to PISFIS first and then then to council.
I believe that that's to include the illegal fines
It's all
as
the
well.
all the fines.
Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
that's in our chapter, so we'll cover it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Kameh?
Thank you. I just had a quick question regarding the number of dispensaries that could be in a location. And I thought I saw that it was sort of no more than 4 within a certain sort of like radius location. It was brought to my attention that, you know, why use 4 when you can actually have less, or, you know, and I realized that in the original proposal, there were not many places given, you know, the distances and all of that. So I'm just wondering, you know, why you went to 4? Is it because it sort of parallels to what is sort of in other areas, or what you found?
Yeah, frankly, yes. It paralleled alcohol, and we thought off-sale alcohol. It's some similarities, similar concerns when you hear from the community. So, you know, we just said this is an existing standard, but, you know, it could go more, it could go less.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Batra had his hand up early, and I forgot he had done that. Councilmember, is your hand still up?
I think it is. At least I'm up.
Go ahead.
All right. Okay. I'd like to ask the question about there was a distance shown from the libraries. Could you please tell what the distance from libraries used to be and what it will be, and what is the state's requirement for that? I think Martina will be the expert there.
Yeah, so I can speak to ours. I believe Wendy can help me with the state's requirement. So right now in urban villages or downtown, under our current regulations, there is no distance requirement to libraries. And that would not change. The only place it would change it would go from 1,000 feet to 500 feet outside of downtown or urban villages. What I will share though as well is that a lot of our commercial corridors are designated as urban villages, probably most of them. And so generally the sites the industry is looking for are in urban villages. So at this point, they're looking at sites that distance wouldn't apply already. So in practice, I don't know that that's gonna make a huge change, but for those sites that are outside of urban villages and downtown, it would go down to 500 feet from 1,000.
Thank you. Well, what's the state's requirement for that? Because
I think for
because
community-
I've heard that we are aligning a lot of our things to the state.
I believe it's 600 feet.
So if it is 600 feet, my suggestion is, since you're aligning everything else to the state and trying to be as strict or as lenient, I suggest that we adopt the same distance. So, Councilmember Foley, if you would consider
We're
that as
verifying
a-
if the state does have a distance requirement to libraries. It may not.
If it doesn't, then that's great.
I think it's
If-
just
if-
schools and daycare centers, but I have to look.
Yeah, so, okay, while you're doing that, let me ask a couple of other questions. Part of it was answered already when Councilmember Duan asked his stuff. Assistant Chief, you indicated that you haven't had any that much extra calls because of or near the establishments related to this thing. And you also answered the question about the DUI. Do we encounter more vehicle incidents where cannabis might be a factor?
Councilmember, the reason it's harder to prove a DUI with marijuana is the typical testing we do of impairment. the symptoms of someone that's intoxicated with alcohol and intoxicated from marijuana aren't always exactly the same. And we also don't have the same type of measurement tools for marijuana. So it's hard to say for certain whether or not we're seeing more of it. But certainly if there's evidence, if there's a collision or we stop somebody for a vehicle code violation and there's evidence that they've been using marijuana and there's evidence that they're impaired, then we can certainly make a DUI arrest. But I truthfully don't have statistics on that and whether or not that's increased.
So my request would be twofold. One, since we are making this a fairly normal element of our life, that means anybody can right age and legally buy this stuff and consume it, then maybe it is time for you to acquire that equipment which will allow you to have such kind of testing. So, because the usage is going to continue to grow, it looks like with the number of businesses growing, number of tax revenue coming to us growing, it's very straightforward that it will be increasing the usage. So, and the chances are that you're going to encounter such people more often. Okay? So it would be time to acquire the equipment, my suggestion would be.
So to the best of my knowledge, that technology is being developed, and I don't know that there's a very precise measuring method. Like with alcohol, you can measure a certain concentration in the blood, but with marijuana, I don't know that there's a standard by which anyone is using to say that this amount is intoxicated and this a lesser amount is not, or even how to measure that. And then it stays in the blood system for quite a long time after use, but the person wouldn't necessarily be impaired even though they might test positive. So it's just, there really isn't the technology right now for us to do a lot of great measurements. So we're going to rely on sort of driving factors. Was somebody's driving obviously impaired? Are they obviously impaired in their actions and things like that? But again, it is a challenge for us.
Yeah, so I guess if there's no technology available, you can't really procure any. So I understand that. And so in that case, I'll say just stay vigilant about the development of the technology. And especially, I think we will need to keep vigilant about the state legislation if there's anything coming in the near future or whenever they have a better understanding of the technology available. The third comment I would have is I saw a gentleman come in and promote wanting the permission to be able to promote the events. Would you have any concern about people gathering together, driving to a place, then coming and having a cannabis party, and then having to drive away? Today, they're probably consuming in their homes or wherever, but there's no reason for them to all gather together and drive to a place and then have to drive back from there. Would you have any concern in that area?
Well, Councilmember, I definitely appreciate your concerns. And again, it would be, similar to an event in which alcohol is served in a public forum. I mean, obviously people are allowed to consume it, but they're not allowed to drive away while intoxicated or commit other crimes due to a level of intoxication. So, I mean, again, I'm not sure that there would be a greater or lesser danger with public consumption of marijuana. I'm not endorsing it necessarily, but I'm not saying that I would have a problem with it necessarily either. But I certainly would have a problem with anyone driving while intoxicated with any substance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be one area I would consider to be keeping a watch on it. Obviously we are liberalizing this thing, and as a result, the consumption should go up and people will be driving to it, going back. So that would be an area to keep, again, a track of that, what it is going to do in terms of additional work on your people and additional enforcements. So those would be the area of my concern in the public safety, and especially as driving gets involved with these things, because we already have enough troubles with the people being able to drive safely. Okay. So with those are my comments. So did we get the information about the state alignment on
Yes,
library?
yes. It is 600 feet from K through 12 schools and daycare and youth centers, so not community centers. They don't have any restrictions on that.
Oh, not the community center, but the libraries.
Or libraries. And I'll note the state regulations also explicitly allow cities to adopt their own standards.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Okay, Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm thankful to our police department, PBCE, and OED staff for bringing forth a great set of recommendations. I'll try to be brief and speak to the significant impact that these policy changes will hopefully bring to the cannabis industry. As we see the economic forecasts in our city budget, it's clear that cannabis is underperforming. And that result is mainly because I believe we've been our very worst enemy. I'm thankful to my colleagues who have come together to draft our memo. Thank you for the leadership of Councilmember Foley, who is the queen, I believe, and appreciate of those colleagues who will join us in investigating how we can lower the burdensome fees we've put on this industry. Doing this promotes greater economic mobility for all, including those equity applicants who I'm sure we're going to be invested in seeing thrive. Just a few questions. One is, I know that obviously there's a bill going through the state legislature authored by Assemblymember Haney for, I think they're like cannabis lounges. Is that something that our staff is watching closely and like anticipating how this may impact policies and ordinances in the future?
Thanks for that question. So we are watching it. Now, I must admit it's been probably a couple months since I've checked on the status, so I will have to go back and check the status. It is something we're watching as of right now, or as of last I checked. It's an opt-in bill, so as far as we can see, it would give the city the option to move toward this if we so wanted. So we're feeling comfortable with that, but I will go back and check the status.
Okay. Great, that's something I'm just anticipating we'd need to get ready for. And then also, there was an article published in Spotlight today that had language talking about today's vote, and there was someone talking about the clustering of the cannabis shops, right? And that we're talking about 4 per cluster. But then my understanding is there could be some overlap to those clusters. I wanted to get staff's perspective to think like, are we potentially paving the way for like a cannabis district or something? Like, do we need to be more mindful of how we're clustering these shops?
Yeah, I mean, so 4 per 1,000, so every single one that would come in would need to essentially draw that 1,000-foot radius around themselves and around all of the other ones in the vicinity, and no one's 1,000-foot radius could end up with more than 4. Now, what I would say is that it could lead to kind of as you march down the street, right? You know, you could be just outside of it, or there's only so much overlap. So it could potentially be a stretch of them on a linear standpoint. For example, most of our commercial areas are kind of linear. So I'm just pulling out West San Carlos. You know, you could kind of have a cluster and then some more just down West San Carlos a little bit. It could lead to that, yes.
So, but just hearing what you said, does that mean there's 1,000 feet between each shop, or is it the cluster and then 1,000 feet around the cluster, I guess?
Yeah, it's a circle around the shop,
Yeah.
and then it could be 4 within that, or that shop, and then 3 others within that circle around that shop. That
With a
comes
total
out
of 4.
1,000 feet.
Okay. But is there room for, could they possibly overlap within that? I guess, could there be clusters overlapping each other, resulting in, I don't know, like 10 on one street in one district, which I know we don't want to repeat, which somewhat occurred in District 7.
No,
So
I mean,
no.
the 1,000-foot radius could not overlap with each other. So again, each one would have that 4 within 1,000. So, you know, 1,000 feet does get you a couple blocks usually, right? So again, you know, as you're driving down, you can kind of imagine 1,000 feet, they could start, there could be a number, for example, going down like a street like West San Carlos or Stevens Creek, is just those come to mind. As
Is there like an
example.
existing diagram of this that you guys could share? or-
We have it in our planning commission presentation, and I'm wondering if we could.
You could always come back to me while you're looking for it. Thank you.
Next council member, Councilmember Cohen.
Yeah, I was just going to ask just a similar question. I mean, I understand the clustering, the 4 per 1,000. My question, it's just more about, you know, single shopping centers, for example. If you can allow 4 and a shopping center owner says, hey, this is good revenue and I'm willing to rent to as many as want to come here, you could in theory have 4 in one shopping center, in one strip mall. You know, I don't want to necessarily anticipate that there's a problem or that maybe doesn't exist or maybe it's not too likely, but I just wonder if there's some in between about, you know, a number per individual property plus the 1,000 foot. So some way to prevent, you know, 4 in a row, 4 next to each other or 4 within one single front-facing mall, or maybe we would argue that that's not a problem. I don't know. Just the thing that occurs to me when I think about that clustering model.
Yeah, definitely when we kind of showed it out, the 4, it could be 4 in a shopping center. If it's a larger shopping center, that could happen, yes, under the 4 in 1,000. So one way to address that would be you could have the concentration and then add back that strict distance between each other, because that's going to start kind of knocking them out of the shopping center. You could limit them to no more than 1 per shopping center per property. So there are some options if that's a concern.
Okay, I mean, I don't want to, again, I don't necessarily want to anticipate a problem. I was wondering if something like the 1,000 foot radius with some kind of limit of 1 or 2 per property might alleviate some people's concerns about what could happen in certain areas.
Yeah, another way to go too is you could lower that per 1,000, 2 per 1,000, right? I mean, you could still have 2 in a shopping center, but you probably wouldn't, you know, shopping centers aren't that big, so that would be another way to go.
Okay, I guess I'll leave it at that and see if anyone else feels the same way.
Okay, next council member. And Councilor Jimenez, your hand is not up, is that right? Yeah, okay. We had a little glitch. No, I'm not trying to bug him. His screen is stuck, as mine was earlier. Okay. Any other hands? Okay. Let's vote.
Jimenez,
Yes.
Torres,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Davis.
You asking me? Yes.
Dwan,
Yes.
Candelas,
No.
Foley,
Aye.
Batra.
Aye, and I'm alone in the room.
Thank you. Kamei,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 10-1.
Mayor, I would move 10.3.
Great. Okay. Let's see.
Who was the second on that? That was really fast.
Jimenez.
Thank you.
Great, and we took these items concurrently, so I don't see any hands. Why don't we vote?
Jimenez,
Yes.
Torres,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Davis.
Yes.
Dwan,
Aye.
Candelas,
No.
Foley,
Aye.
Batra,
Aye, and I'm alone in the room.
Kamei,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 10-1.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to staff for all your work on this. I know it's been a long journey. Okay, we're on to item 10.2. A rezoning and permit. Property located at 1655 Berryessa Road, and we have a short presentation.
I think so. Mayor and Council, thank you. Chris Burton, Director of Planning, Building, Code Enforcement, joined this evening by Robert Manford, Deputy Director for for Planning Development Review, David Keon, our Principal Planner for Environmental Review, and Rachel Vanderveen, Assistant Director for the Housing Department. Just a quick aside, it's almost exactly 2 years to the day since we approved the Berryessa-Bart Urban Village Plan that really set the stage for development on this property by designating the land uses, and really setting out the layout for development across this property. So I know that because it was my first council meeting, so I'm 2 years in. So as noted, the property is at 1655 Berryessa Road. This is a 13 gross acre site. It's within, as noted, the Berryessa-Bart Urban Village District. The project itself really is made up by a number of components. It's a planned development zoning, laying out the master plan and the uses allowed. It's a planned development permit, again, that really sort of lays out the site and all the public and private streets. And then it's a vesting tentative map that merges the existing 3 parcels into one and then subdivides it to accommodate all of the development. The project includes 850 residential units across a couple of different types. So it's really recognizing a significant amount of density in the multifamily portion. So we're looking at around 120 units to the acre. And then, it's really sort of looking for the opportunity to respect the interface with the surrounding single-family neighborhood by including a number of townhomes and single-family residences, as well as approximately 450,000 square feet of commercial uses. So obviously, as with all of our development projects, we look for consistency with the general plan, and in this case, the urban village plan. Our citywide design standards and the municipal code, as well as in this case where we have single family, our design guidelines, and of course, CEQA. So under the environmental review, we did complete a draft environmental impact report that was circulated back in August of last year. It identified relevant mitigation measures for the potential impacts disclosed in that analysis around air quality, nesting birds, subsurface archaeological resources, hazardous materials from past uses of the site, as well as construction-related noise and vibration. The mitigation measures included in the monitoring report account for those impacts. There were approximately 60 public comments on the draft EIR that included concerns related to air quality during construction and operation, as well as wetlands, noise, and land use. Our first amendment was released with the response to comments back in April of this year, and based on the comments received, no recirculation is necessary. So staff's recommendation is to adopt the resolution certifying the EIR, approve an ordinance that rezones the property to include the planned development rezoning, as well as adopting resolutions approving, subject to conditions, the vesting tentative map and the planned development permit. I did just want to take a second to acknowledge the memo from the Mayor and Councilmember Cohen. A couple of sort of important points in there, and I want to ensure that I'm reaffirming the department's commitment to work with council officers relative to development projects. Obviously, that takes on a number of different forms, from our one-on-one discussions when we talk about major development projects, individual discussions we have with your staff as we move through the process, as well as the partnership that we have with each of the council offices around community outreach and engagement through stakeholder meetings and our community meeting process. Certainly something that we value and a great opportunity for us to hear your feedback as we move through the development permit process. With regards to how we prioritize and plan for density, especially with our urban villages and especially in relation to transit-rich environments and those areas where the city is making significant commitments to transit. Obviously, that's a conversation that begins and ends in the general plan. So as we assign density through our general plan process throughout the city, we start that consideration. In this case, there is an urban village plan in place, right, which allowed us to have this conversation in a very detailed way with City Council. It approved that up to 30 dwelling units per acre on the periphery for the single-family homes and the townhomes. The approximately 50 units within that represent a density of around 23 units per acre, so it is consistent, and it's small lot single-family. I know there's some concern around us approving single-family, but when we look at the balance of this site and the real increase in density that it represents when we deliver all 850 units, that's an opportunity to really drive residential development close to transit. So we look at that site in its entirety and the mix of uses. So obviously we'll continue to look for opportunities to raise these issues and have continued conversation with council, obviously, as we prepare the next set of urban village plans. 5 Wounds is in the work. We're going to move forward with a report on our next market-ready urban village plan in August. So each of those plans will continue to have these conversations, as well as our regular report to the Community and Economic Development Committee, which is a biannual report on urban villages and all things citywide planning. So with that, staff's available for questions, and I believe the applicant's representative, Eric Schoenauer, is available for their statement as well.
Great. And Eric, on behalf of the applicant, you want to present? Okay. We have a 5-minute timer. You're probably not the only one.
Thanks for all your work on the budget. Is it up? In any case, good evening, Mayor Mahan, members of the council. My name is Eric Schoenauer. I represent the Ficino family on this application. And first, we wanted to thank the staff and all the city departments. We've been working on this project for 4 years. We started before the urban village plan was adopted, and we're all in total alignment with the project. So we, let's see. Hey, I'm sorry that this high-tech system. There we go. We're in alignment, and as the director said, the Berryessa-Bart Urban Village Plan was adopted 2 years ago, and all we're doing today is putting in place the necessary entitlements to implement that plan that the council adopted. The goal is to have a mix of housing types within walking distance from the BART station. We have for-sale housing, we have rental housing, we have market rate housing, we have affordable housing proposed within the project. Per the plan, we have commercial space that will front on Berryessa Road to activate the street, and there'll be a new neighborhood park within the development. And I just wanted to show you the Urban Village Plan documents. So this is the conceptual urban design plan. The Ficino property is at the bottom left cluster of buildings there. And so that was what is a conceptual vision of how the Urban Village Plan could play out. And this is a close-up of the Ficino property. So you can see the blue building is the commercial space that would happen along Berryessa Road. The taller residential buildings, podium buildings, will be a mix of affordable market and for-sale units. As the director mentioned, the plan called for a step down with lower residential buildings at the perimeter, and then you see the neighborhood park within the plan. So that's what was conceptually envisioned for the plan, and this is our site plan layout. So you can see the orientation's changed, but on the right is Berryessa Road. So we have the commercial block. We have 3 podium residential blocks. We have the towns and small lot single family on the perimeter, and we have the park. So we've literally just replicated the urban village plan pretty much exactly as it was envisioned when the council adopted it. And just lastly, because this has come up, the way urban village plans work is there are land use designations in the plan, and then there are definitions of those designations. So the perimeter land that the director referenced is designated mixed use neighborhood, and you can see the definition, and I highlighted the fact that small lot single family homes are allowed in that area. And so regardless of what other words are used elsewhere in the narrative of the plan, this is the definition of what's allowed in the land use in the urban village plan. And so because of that, staff has found that what's being proposed conforms to the plan. And so for all of those reasons, we hope that the council will approve the project as recommended in the memo by Councilmember Cohen and Mayor Mahan, as well as the unanimous Planning Commission, as well as the professional staff of the city. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Eric. Okay, let's go to public comment.
Paul, followed by Aiden.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. First of all, I'd like to know how many parking spaces there is. Okay, because you guys con people into believing that only certain neighborhoods are going to be parking restricted and they're going to be minimized. Now, my estimation, 590 units, you guys are going to have 700 plus parking units. I want that cut in half, and I want that on the record right now. How many parking spaces are going to be available to this particular development? That's number one. Number two, is this market rate housing? Number three, if it is, just because it's part of this envisioned plan and showing hours running the show, that doesn't mean nothing. What it means is he's leveraged power. That's all it is. And circumvented democracy. That's what it is. He has leveraged power, circumventing democracy. The other thing is that area is still saturated in Berryessa blood. That has never been amended, never been accounted for. The deeds in that area were extracted from the Berryessa family. And so like how old, this family that's in charge of this sale, where did they get this deed? How did they inherit that property? When you start researching that, you will find it will lead to the Berryessa family. 5 brothers murdered along with the father because they wanted the land. And so this is the history of that area, and Chris Burton just kind of like glosses over that stuff. I mean, he's just the gentrifier. Well, you can't do it. Not with my permission. You don't get to do it.
Aiden, followed by Tamara.
Good evening. My name is Aiden Marshall, speaking on behalf of Silicon Valley Residents for Responsible Development. Silicon Valley Residents urges the City Council to continue today's hearing and not recommend approval of the project at this time. We submitted written comments on the draft and final EIR, which explains that the EIR fails to adequately analyze and mitigate significant environmental impacts. These include public health impacts from diesel particulate matter and soil contamination. Further, the city's housing conditions of approval failed to require the project to construct on-site affordable housing, instead allowing the applicant to forfeit a bond as an in lieu fee, perhaps years after the project is approved. This failure renders the project inconsistent with local policies calling for on-site affordable housing. For example, the Berryessa BART Urban Village Plan includes a 25% affordable housing policy goal. This project would not be consistent or helpful towards this goal if it pays the in lieu fee instead of building the units on site. Further, payments of an in lieu fee would not help the city meet its current and urgent regional housing needs allocation needs. Due to these impacts and general plan inconsistencies, the city cannot make the findings necessary to approve the project's entitlements. Therefore, we strongly urge the City Council not to approve this project until the city prepares a legally adequate EIR pursuant to CEQA, and second, brings the project into compliance with all state and local land use policies. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Tamara, followed by Catherine.
Good evening. I just wanted to get a better understanding. From what I read on the slide, it stated that there would be affordable housing in that area. It would be important to have affordable housing and not just redevelopment or new development in these areas, because we also need our poor communities to be able to commute. We also need to make sure that if we are doing affordable housing, that we're not building on areas that are contaminated and that are not adequate for the people, because typically I have seen areas in which they want to create new development for affordable housing, and then years later they find out that there's something wrong with the soil, things like that. And I'm sure that if we were doing developments for market rates, we would be looking into it. And if there's lack of support from other council members, it just kind of has a lot to say because it would appear that it's just in those areas. And I just want to have a better understanding of what this is, what's going on, because I mean, I have worked in affordable housing for a very long time, and I have plenty of experience in it. And I just want to know what the issues are and what exactly you are doing. And, I understand that it's commercial and, in additional units, but what is the percentage? If there's affordable housing, what's the percentage of housing? Now, with regards to the parking, if it would be for affordable housing, then, sometimes you need more parking stalls. Like at the property where I work, it was 85 units and we had about 115 parking stalls. So I guess I believe I just would like to have those questions answered. Thank you very much.
Catherine, followed by Blair.
Good evening. I don't know a lot about this project because guess what? I've been concentrating on defending Measure E, just like the rest of the affordable housing ecosystem. And this item needs to be continued because I would not be surprised if the whole attack on Measure E was just meant to distract us from other issues like this project, the police budget, the SJPOA scandal, and this needs to be continued until a time when all interested parties have had an opportunity to analyze all the existing documents. Thank you.
Blair?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a housing development project that's around the flea market area, is my understanding. And Eric Schoenhauer, I think, is in charge of it. And it's been to planning, the Planning Commission. It's been approved, and it was an important point of myself that I feel that is, for as much as the flea market vendors can be working around the development of the future of the flea market area itself, I hope they can be allowed to lend their voice and add their voice to this area as well, as it will be related to the flea market. And it's important to allow the flea market vendors to feel they are really a part of the process. And I hope we can be accepting of that concept and want to work towards that sort of concept. And when we do, I think we'll really be building the future of this area well. And as I've stated, the importance of how flea markets vendors can actually help develop the future of the flea market area in its building shapes, its land design. I think that's interesting. I think that would be a real organic approach. And good luck in those efforts. Thank you.
Ms. Rayan Mendoza.
Yes, I would like to see how many affordable housing this unit is gonna have. I've been trying to find out and I cannot find it. That's one thing. And another thing is if it's gonna have commercial space and it's about close to the Berryessa, like Blair just said, I would like to see some type of commitment from the developer to show some good faith to try to offer some of those spaces to the people and the vendors from the flea market. That would be maybe a good concept that we can start using, of how we can start trying to help those that are going to be displaced, to try to find them places and new nice spaces like the ones that they are building right there in front of the flea market too. You know, all of those things are empty, right? The other day I drove by there and they're all empty. Let's try to get our people and try in those spaces, you know, and affordable housing. We have to keep fighting for affordable housing because interim housing, that's what it is. Let's understand that interim, right? It's temporarily, and we need affordable, permanent, affordable housing. So thank you.
Back to council.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Cohen.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm excited that this project's moving forward. It's probably the closest property to the BART station of any property that's been developed so far, and it's not at all related to the flea market. It's not a flea market owned site. It's another privately owned site next door. It is right along the BART tracks and right across the street from the BART station, so it's a good place to build housing. I have a question for the applicant first. Of course, people have been asking about affordable housing, but I was going to ask about this. What is the current expectation for number of affordable housing units on site? At least, what's the hope?
Well, originally, when we started this project, the goal was simply to provide the 15 or 20% that's required on site in a standalone building. However, we've found a development partner that may be interested in doing more than that. So our goal is to have 2 podium buildings with affordable that will have over 600 affordable units within those buildings. That's our goal. There are no guarantees because ultimately we have to finance that. But that is what our intentions that we've submitted to the Housing Department in our Affordable Housing Compliance Plan, and we're hopeful that we can achieve that.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to just clarify that because that's what you had told me a couple weeks ago. It's very exciting. It's 850 units, of which the goal is to build 600 plus of them as affordable units. This is not a normal, typical private development proposal in the city of San Jose. I want to thank, I know that 2 of the property owners are on the call listening in. I want to thank the Vicino family for their commitment to doing something a little different here and actually building a lot of affordable housing units for the community. So that's the first point. I'm also hopeful we can get that park, and I know that at some point you talked about pickleball there, so that would be exciting, since I just learned today that we have 0 pickleball courts and they got 26 in District 9. So anyway, thank you for your commitment to the neighborhood, and thanks to the family for their commitment to doing affordable housing on site. I'm hopeful it will work out, and hopefully we'll figure out how to finance that. I want to just say to the housing staff, the planning staff, and to the applicant, the memo that we submitted is not at all an indictment or criticism of the process that was followed. The process was followed as outlined. The zoning was followed by the applicant. I think what's happening, of course, is that there's a reevaluation in our minds across the city about the appropriateness of single-family homes anywhere, let alone in an area right next to the transit hub of Berryessa. I mean, it's not just a BART station, but it's the transit hub in Northeast San Jose. So I think we were just thinking through how can we make sure that when projects are coming forward with this kind of usage on the site, a single family that the council may now 2 years, 3 years after the zoning was done, may now want to reconsider what they want to do with the land. How can we get involved in that process a little earlier to sort of think about whether that's still what we want to prioritize the site for, so that we don't get the project coming to council at the point at which really it's impractical or impossible to actually make a change. So maybe the ask in the memo is mainly, let's think about that, and let's come back and talk about that with council about what we might be able to do to allow the council to reevaluate, or allow individual council members to look at that site and say, hey, maybe we want to rethink what we had said back when this site was zoned. With that, I'm going to move the memo that that Mayor Mahan and myself submitted, and look forward to this project moving forward.
Second.
Great. Thanks, council member. And I'll just echo everything council member just said. Thank you to the applicant, the Vicino family. Really appreciate their commitment to this mixed-use development that includes the affordable on-site, which is a great win. And thank you to staff for the work you've done. And I think, just to add to what Councilmember Cohen said, I think often the applicant is rightly going to be incentivized to just go with the path of least resistance. But where there's a case where we've got a major transit hub, we're in an urban village, the council member thinks it may be appropriate to go denser, we certainly want to send that, be as early in the process as possible to let the applicant know that that's something that, at least politically, we're very open to. This is a perfect site where In many ways, the denser the better, just given the proximity to this multi-billion-dollar transit investment. But agreed, the process was followed as outlined, and this is a conversation for future projects. Okay, thanks for all that commentary, Councilmember Cohen, and your support of this great project, and we'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to get a few numbers clear. So this is going to be 24 single-family homes at market rate, 24 townhomes at market rate, 590 condo units at market rate. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor, it's a mixture of condos and apartments, so it's for a total of 850 units. So it's
so the 590 is part of the 850.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It's 850 total for the site.
For the entire site, including the single family
That's correct.
and the 24. Okay, so the total number is 850. So some of the 590 condo units will be a market, or see the thing is that it specifies that there will be up to 590 condominiums, right? So I'm just trying to figure out the math in terms of how much is left for affordable, right? And I think that it's great that, you know, there could be approximately 600 units of affordable, but then the math doesn't work, right? Because if you have for sale condos, then that's kind of different if you say you have up to 590. So I'm just sort of like trying to understand what is and what is not, right? So that's number one. Number two, I feel that it's unfortunately, and I understand how this all came to be and how things were set up in the past and all of that, and the step-down design and all of that. I wish I would have had it at El Paseo. So, you know, there you go. But in terms of densities, I think it's a big problem because this is a lost opportunity in a major, major transit hub, right? The densities on this should be super duper high, right? So while I understand how it came to be, and I will support this, I really think that it is done in a way that it is not appropriate, especially in a transit hub area. So there. And then the other thing is that we've gone through a lot in terms of affordable housing. When are we going to get the affordable housing? When are we going to build it and all that? I would like to see, and I'd ask Councilmember Cohen, if we could make the affordable part as part of condition of approval. Because if we don't have it as a condition of approval, I don't know that we're going to get it. You know, it's sort of a wish and, well, maybe, and how, and all of that. So I could be wrong, right? And maybe that's great. You know, I'm fine being wrong. But I think that we bank on these wishes of affordability and having affordable, and oh, isn't this great? We're going to have affordable housing near the BART. And then it doesn't happen, right? For whatever reason. So I think as a condition of approval, a certain percentage on site has to be built for affordable, and we will get affordable. If not, I mean, maybe they won't build it. And I understand that that's a trade-off, right? But I think that at some point we're going to have to decide whether having affordable on site is what we want, especially on a transit corridor. So I would ask if you would add that. If not, that's okay too, but I think that it would be very, very good for us to say how serious we are to ensuring that we have affordable housing, especially along transit corridors. Thanks.
Yeah, so let me just follow up on a couple of questions you asked. So back to the math and the numbers. The 590 was the original plan in terms of what was zoned for that property, that you could do 590 and then you would do the 20% affordable inclusionary. But the plan now, is that right? And that the plan now is to almost flip that and build far more affordable than that 590, than that 20% number?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure which numbers the vice mayor is reading, but I can speculate that what's going on with the numbers is that there are descriptions for the tentative map, and the tentative map has 590 potential lots, because it's standard practice when you build apartments to map them for future potential sale. Okay, that's just a technicality. The reality in this project is the zoning and the EIR allow up to 850 units. Of those 850, 48 are the townhome and small lot single family for sale. 105 podium condominiums are for sale. Those are all planned to be built by KB and are all for sale. And then the other 2 blocks are the remainder of the units that we're currently, our goal is to make them all at a level of affordability that's 80% or below, and there's a mix of percentages.
So that would be your
That's the
600 plus number of affordable units. At least
Exactly.
that's the current plan.
That's the current
The
plan.
obligation is far less than that, but the plan, and by the way, the maps that are both shown by the planning department and by you still showed the old plan, which had mostly market rate and just one building of affordable. What the current plan is to convert that big center block, which was actually market rate on the map, to an affordable building, which would be all affordable. That would be very exciting if it were to happen. So let me ask a question now of the planning department to follow up on the second part of this. I mean, obviously, we'd like some enforceable commitment for the affordable. We know that the way this gets built is that the market rate gets built first to pay for the infrastructure, and then, you know, they're looking for the financing to hopefully get the affordable, and we all have that objective. What kind of enforcement mechanism would there be at a point at which, if we were to put in a requirement, if at that point there's no financing to do the affordable above at the level that we require?
So there's a couple of components to how we're sort of dealing with the affordable. Obviously, the requirements for affordable development on any property are governed by the inclusionary housing ordinance, which includes a number of different compliance options, and there's a whole history behind how we arrived at that point. Typically what we do in the land use permit, so in our plan development permit, would be to reference that affordable housing compliance plan. In this instance, and then typically what we do is we specify the timing relative to that. So in this instance, we were looking at different options, and so that's why there's a slightly different condition relative to the bonding. As far as enforcement, so I'm going to ask for an assist from the attorneys on this one. You know, obviously, council has the ability to request things of the developer that we can include as part of conditions of approval. And then that would be, you know, as we move through the process, that would be a requirement prior to issuance of building permit. So it would condition it in that sense. As far as I would let the applicant speak to their response to that request from council.
Do you have anything to add to that before I ask the applicant for a response?
Good evening, Council. Johnny Fan, City Attorney's Office. Yes, in terms of enforcement, there's really 2 enforcement mechanisms. One is we can withhold building permits on the project from moving forward, and the other is the applicant would need to go through the amendment process on the entitlements if they want to do something different.
Okay, so we can put it in the entitlements now. We can certainly, obviously, if the project doesn't get, only the market rate gets built, there's still an inclusionary fee requirement that would have to be paid if the project got walked away from anyway. But clearly, I wouldn't necessarily want to put conditions on that say you have to build the 600, because that's way. I mean, that's a voluntary commitment that they're making to us. That's way beyond what the requirement is. Is there would it be acceptable to say for the 20%, 15 to 20% number to be put in as conditions of approval? I mean, you need to understand that in terms of how that could work for the applicant before, you know, trying to put something into the.
If I could jump in, Rachel Vanderveen, Assistant Director with the Housing Department. I think that one condition of approval that would, I think, meet the spirit of what I hear you trying to do tonight would be to require the building of affordable on-site, because again, that's really what is exciting, and that's what we've been working with the applicant on, and that's really what we would like to see, honestly. It's really our goal to build affordable housing through this policy. Fees are great, but that's really not the ultimate goal. Because again, this is right, it's a fantastic site to have a range of incomes, have people and our residents be able to live right here by this transportation opportunity. So, so a statement of having even 15% or 20% on-site, built on-site, that is what we would be looking for.
So yeah, that was what I was getting at. So the required level would be a condition of approval, but anything beyond that would be the voluntary projects that the developer does, but we wouldn't condition the project on the 600 units. We'd condition it on the required level of inclusionary housing that we have in our city policy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a policy decision.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
up
understand.
to
I'm just
you.
looking at you, and I guess
Yeah.
I'm looking to Eric to see, you know, how this affects the project. But I'm happy. I'm willing to consider that, but I want to make sure that you know, we're not.
This really isn't the best way to make policy, project by project, and quite frankly, I don't think it's allowed. The city attorney can chime in. You have an adopted inclusionary housing ordinance. The project must comply with that ordinance. Forcing us to do anything beyond that is not allowed unless we voluntarily agree to do it, which we would not do. I mean, we cannot take an entire city block, which in our development, and say it's going to be a certain way when we have no guarantee of financing it. We have no guarantee of getting tax credits. We have no guarantee of us being able to deliver on the commitment. And so it doesn't seem fair that the council would impose on an individual project a new mandate that nobody else has. And I would suggest it would be more fair that if the council wants to look at imposing mandatory on-site requirements, that they should analyze that policy and bring it back as a policy discussion, in our opinion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, and obviously we don't like to spring these things on at the last minute at this meeting. So, yeah. I mean, and look, I was excited about this project because of the voluntary commitment that was being made to try for the 600 plus affordable housing units on this site, which would obviously far exceed any requirement that we would have and far exceed anything that we would ever impose. So, you know, I wasn't having further conversations about the affordable part. We were just having conversations recently about the single family element, which we're trying to address for future developments through coming back to talk about it as a council. So I think it makes sense to, at this point, to just sort of approve as is, and then, you know, we can consider, so potentially consider in the future how we want to address future projects.
Yeah, and just to add on, I mean, Rachel, can you just share with us when the council last updated roughly when we last updated the inclusionary housing ordinance? Because we had this conversation. I know we have a lot of new council members, but roughly for anybody in the box, when did we last update it? What were the broad contours of the updates we made, and how would it be best for if the council wanted to ensure that projects had some on-site, and there's a lot of challenges with that actually, but because there's a reason we designed the policy this way, the ordinance this way, it's an actual ordinance. But if we wanted to change that, what would be the best way to do that? Probably not one-off on the dais around one project, I'm assuming.
Okay, so, all right, so we did do a lot of work over the last, 3 to 5 years and really looking at the inclusionary program, and we did kind of an overhaul. We did the majority of the work in 2019, and we did some updates in 2021. So that's really when we did the most work on this ordinance. In answering your question about what's the best way to think about this policy, I do think that since we've done the overhaul, we've seen more interesting things come up. to be honest, right? I mean, I think that this is an example of a very interesting proposal, and we have seen creative solutions and responses to the changes that we've made in the ordinance that are really kind of exciting. And so I think that, you know, we could in the coming year or whatever, go ahead and take a look at the policy. And I think what we should do is look at what we've learned since the changes, because the proposals that we've seen have evolved from what we were seeing prior to those changes.
Okay, thank you. And I assume if we were doing that, we'd probably, just to account for trade-offs and staff and all the rest, I'm going to come to you next, Johnny. I would assume we might want to get that on the appropriate committee, CD, for example, on the work plan, give staff the runway to come back with some analysis, have the discussion in a committee, and then bring something forward to the council once we've had time to bake it. Just given that a few years ago, we went through a pretty comprehensive process to design a policy and an ordinance. Johnny, did you want to add on?
Yeah, so just to provide some background, our inclusionary housing ordinance was adopted back in 2010, and it was litigated all the way to the California Supreme Court, and we prevailed because I think Eric is correct. We're not allowed to impose a requirement on the developer in terms of whether they provide on-site inclusionary, pay the fees, or dedicate land. However, our position is we are not imposing here. What happened is, as part of the planning application, the applicant is required to submit a compliance plan, affordable compliance plan application. And in that application, they set forth how they would like to comply with the inclusionary housing ordinance. It's something that is totally voluntary. You can check the box and say, I'm paying fees. You can say, I'm dedicating land. You can say, I'm going to do on-site inclusionary or some combination thereof. And in improving the project, we are simply memorializing what they submitted to the city. So we are not imposing. So on this project, the compliance plan does say they're going to do on-site inclusionary. So if the council wants to, they can add a condition of approval to memorialize what's been submitted to the city back in 2021.
Thank you for the additional context. I'm going to go back to Vice Mayor to continue her line of questioning. Go ahead.
Thank you. And, you know, I agree with Eric. This is probably not to, you know, sort of pick on just one project. We probably need a better, larger discussion. But this is what's before us. You're asking us for up to 850 units. So I think that we have to weigh the decisions here on whether to grant that or not. I know that staff has gone through the whole process and our ordinance and all of that. But I also think that if we are serious about affordable housing, we need to really step it up. And the best thing, as Rachel said, is to have it on site. I think it's great. I totally agree with my fellow council member, Cohen, that it'd be great if it's all done, but we can't live in a wish world, right? And so as far as I'm concerned, if we're able to get a majority, 15%, 20%, memorialized, which is what has been mentioned, came to us, it is extremely valuable because then we know that, hey, you know, at least we have these affordable units coming online in addition to all the other stuff that we want to do. So for me, it's important to memorialize those things because it's amazing how things change and all of a sudden, oh, well, that was then, this is now. So I tend to, you know, take the moment. And like I said, I would prefer this to be much more dense, right? I mean, I'm going to live with a 10, 11-story unit, 991 units over at El Paseo, which has none of the transit orientation that this area has. And so my feeling is, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing? So maybe we need to take a look at all of these areas. But I really think that, you know, in order to grant the up to 850 residential units, I think that as part of condition of approval, we should do this to memorialize what has been submitted by the applicant. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Dwan?
I just got a quick question for Chris Burton on the mayor and Councilmember Cohen memorandum on item number 2. Would that slow down delay the project completion team and increase the permitting and planning time for you?
Sorry, excuse me. Thanks, Councilmember. Yeah, I think that's a good question. It really is a case of if there's an intent to bring back individual projects through some kind of process to the full city council, then yes, it would likely increase time and uncertainty for applicants. As stated, we do, as a department, try and coordinate very closely with each of the council offices on all of the development applications that come in. We provide that list on a monthly basis and kind of talk through the key issues. So if it's more kind of through that informal process, then I think, that's definitely something we already accommodate. But if there's an intent to have some form of additional process, then yes, that potentially slows us down.
And how much time would you save if you were to eliminate that?
I don't know that it's a time saving right now because we don't currently do that, with the exception of potentially general plan amendments, in which case we do have an option to bring that for a pre-read at council through the early consideration process. But, just on average, it's really the time it would take. If there was an intent for us to formalize some process, it would be the time it takes to sort of get through a memo process and bring it to council.
Would the benefit outweigh the cost, in a sense?
I believe that's a policy discussion for the council to weigh.
And do you have any recommendation regarding this particular issues?
Well, and again, Councilmember, I think, our intent as a department is always to sort of provide as much transparency and opportunity for feedback throughout the process for the City Council as well as for the community stakeholders in our work with the development community directly. So we believe that we do a good job of that right now. We're open to conversations about how we can improve. I think sort of looking at that existing process and continuing to evolve it would be the most appropriate way forward.
All right, thank you very much.
Sorry. Councilmember Batra?
Vice Mayor, thank you very much for asking those very relevant questions. I had a lot of the same on my mind. After I read the memo, I really couldn't figure out what was really being committed. I can see all the possibilities over there that we may get 590 apartment condos, townhomes, this and that. Could somebody describe what is really the proposal today if they were going to go forward? Because, by the way, this was the project I was so impressed with that I tried to quote it during our previous discussion about interim housing, affordable housing and all. I said, this is the kind of projects we want to have. It looked to me that it was going to be a person developing this thing without any financial subsidies or Measure E funds and still going to give us some affordable units. Please help me understand what this project is giving and what it is taking.
Sorry, Councilmember. So as far as what is included in the project,
yes.
So currently it's a mixed-use project that has 3 components. The first is our mixed-use neighborhood component, which is 48 units comprised of both single-family and townhomes that sit around 2 sides of the periphery of the site. Then in the Transit Employment Center, there is 455,000 square feet of commercial uses. And then the balance of the 850 units, or 802 units approximately, are a higher density configuration, as the applicant noted, I think there's 105 units in one block, and then the balance in the remaining 2 blocks that sits roughly at around 120 units per acre. It also includes a public park.
Okay. And based on our inclusionary policy, not for specially developed for this particular project, what is the minimum number of units we get of the affordable?
So there's a number of opportunities for them to meet, to satisfy the requirements of the inclusionary housing ordinance. At its minimum, it's 15% of the units on site are affordable, or they can pay the in lieu fee on 20% of the total units. Or there are other options related to off-site provision of affordable housing. I'll let Rachel add any context.
Okay.
So again, as part of the process to come to this point for you today is the applicant goes through and actually completes an affordable housing compliance plan. And in this case, the developer came forward and recommended that out of the 850 units, 697 of them would be affordable. And what they did is actually worked with us to come in under an alternative method. One of the reasons for that is because there are going to be several townhomes and condos, and the sizes of those units are quite large, like the square footage. And so what they were thinking about doing was building more units than would be required, but the sizes would be smaller in comparison to the townhome size, because these are going to be rental apartments. And so so we had kind of a back and forth conversation several times with the applicant, and essentially the 697 units are broken between studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms, and we felt that because of the large number of affordable, that it was really meeting a greater public purpose, because it did not meet some of the requirements of the ordinance, the typical requirements, which were related to the size. So anyway, so essentially they were making some trade-offs between the size and number of affordable units, and this is what we came to and agreed to in their compliance plan.
So, but is that, I think the question was, that is a possibility, that's what they've shown you. Is that what the commitment is, or that is, if the best of the best happens for the city, this is what we'll get? But there's a little they can do and move on in life.
I guess everyone's looking at me for an answer. What I will tell you is the conditions of approval that is in the draft resolution is not crystal clear on memorializing this commitment from the compliance plan. So I think it's generically says that they will comply with the inclusionary housing ordinance, but it's not specific on referencing this specific compliance plan. I do think that if we want to make sure the developer is complying with the submitted compliance plan, then yeah, we would need to tweak the language in the conditions of approval.
I don't think we want to impose any special conditions on this project, but we do want to understand what this project is committing to, because we will walk away from this conversation that in hopefully a couple of years, we're going to have 697 affordable units. And if there's no commitment, it may be that we have none, like the vice mayor has expressed. So I'm trying to get what is really the commitment. I'm not imposing any new conditions.
Yeah, can I just confirm right now, unless something were to change, and we'd want to hear the input of the applicant, I think, but under the current approach and the motion on the floor, the commitment, as with any other project that we approve, is they have to adhere to the inclusionary housing ordinance, which means that ultimately there is and I haven't done the math on this, I don't know the hard numbers, but there is a certain number of affordable units or a certain value worth of fees that this project would have to pay that is a formula in the ordinance based on how much market rate they build. Now, they've laid out a vision that is much more ambitious that I think we're excited about, but as the applicant has said, they don't have, nor do most applicants at this stage, have the financing in place to do all of that. So yes, I think the concern that's been raised is a very fair one, that there's a very ambitious vision here that we're all excited about, but that may or may not be financeable. What is the commitment is the ordinance that we passed, that we have imposed on all projects. We have a waiver for downtown that changes the rules a little bit for downtown high-rise specifically, but is that accurate? Can somebody just repeat back to me if I'm missing anything there?
Deputy Director for Planning, Robert Manford. Mr. Mayor, what you said is correct, but what we also must understand is that this is a master plan. It's a PD zoning. So later on, the applicant is going to have to come for individual permits, PD permits. And at that point, we'll have to ensure that IHO is actually complied with. Because as it stands, most of the times, this is at the back end of planning, so the numbers are not available until they come for the PD permits.
Right. And they may come forward first or only with financing for a market rate project, and they may decide to fulfill our inclusionary ordinance with some on-site units that they figured out how to finance, or potentially with just in lieu fees. I guess the point is, to impose something beyond the ordinance we have, I think we'd want to step back and take a look at the ordinance and say, is it as strong as we want it to be? Does it incentivize on site as much as we want? What are the trade-offs if we were to go that direction? I'm getting concerned that the line of questioning is trying to lead us to on the fly modifying an ordinance that we've spent a lot of time and effort and had a lot of input in designing, and it's maybe not perfect, maybe needs to be updated. But I feel like we're back to where we were 20 minutes ago in the conversation. Johnny, you want to jump in again? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So the developer has a lot of different options in terms of meeting the inclusionary housing ordinance. In this instance, what happened was the developer couldn't meet all the different requirements under the IHO. So they submitted a compliance plan as what's called an alternative, is that we can't meet all the strict requirements, so we're going to give you an alternative that gives you extraordinary benefit, going above and beyond your normal 15% on site. So it's not that we're rewriting the ordinance, it's not that we're imposing anything. The applicant came in because they can't meet all the different requirements. They proposed an alternative, and that alternative was, hey, we can't meet all the requirements, but we're going to do a more affordable
Okay, so this gets to the heart of the matter. If they fail to follow through on the alternative, does it then default back to the IHO?
No.
I'm seeing heads yes and no in the box. Okay,
No,
so
no.
what happens?
Under
I assume this is not a loophole they've just discovered.
Under the IHO, the city manager has authority to make minor modification to the approved compliance plan. If there's significant modification, it goes back through the approval process again. So here, when council approved this compliance plan, let's say they come in and say, we just want to pay fees. Our position is that's a significant change of the compliance plan that was approved by council. It would need to go through the approval process again. And what I'm saying is, I think the ordinance is clear on that. The conditions of approval that was drafted in the resolution was really murky. I mean, that's where we can clarify some of this in terms of citing to the compliance plan that they submitted, because it really just says you need to comply with the IHO.
Sorry, just repeat that very last part again. What is murky?
The murky is the conditions of approval language in the resolutions. We just have generic language that says you need to comply with the IHO.
I see.
And so that's where I think things can be clarified. But I think it's clear in the ordinance that they went through a process, they couldn't meet the requirements, they submitted a compliance plan that's being approved as part of this project. If there's significant change, it needs to go back to the city council.
Okay, so it would come back to us in that case. Okay, sorry, Councilmember Batra, you were
I just want to thank you, Mayor, for clarifying that. And as we said, we are not trying to create new policies on the fly. So the last clarification which was given that we got on that alternative plan, is that alternative plan the one which says 697 affordable units, or is it something different? Because I want to walk away happy, and hopefully the answer is yes.
Yes, the compliance plan that it is approved right now is an alternate method under the ordinance, and it includes 697 affordable units.
Great, thank you very much. And that says that if anything changes, we will be seeing those changes unless they're minor. So I'm happy with that. I think, yes, please, you have answered my questions and satisfied the ambiguity which I had after reading the plan. So good job and a good project. Proceed forward.
Thank you, council member. Okay. Let's see another hands. So going once. All right. I'm not even going to say going twice. Let's vote.
Let's
get for it. Yeah.
In case anybody's in the back, I'm going to give them a second. Jimenez, Torres, yes? Okay, Torres,
Yes.
Cohen,
Aye.
Ortiz,
Aye.
Davis,
Yes.
Dwan,
Aye.
Candelas,
Yes.
Foley,
Aye.
Batra,
I continue to be lonely here.
Kamei,
Aye.
Mahan.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great.
Despite all my questions, but yes.
Great. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you to staff. Okay, and thank you to my colleagues. This was quite a marathon meeting. We got through quite a bit. We are on to open forum, opportunity for members of the public to comment on any items not on today's agenda. Tony?
Paul,
Oh, great.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe. I liked what I heard from Vice Mayor Kamei. That was excellent. That's the kind of policy that we need. We can't be beholden to developers and kowtow to them. You don't want to do business here on our terms? Bye. Go somewhere else. Go somewhere else. This is our land, and we vote in our representatives to ensure that they are going to protect our interest. The council doesn't exist to protect the interests of the developer, and that's what it sounded like, you know. And I don't like that, because what it means is that I can't trust you. I can't trust you because you're a snake. That's what it is. Because you'll slither and you. I mean, listen to the way that some of the questions were answered. There was direct questions slated to Chris Burton, and he didn't answer the question. Now, when I'm sitting here at these meetings and I'm listening, I'm paying attention to the questions that are being posed by the council members. Now, when staff doesn't answer the question and they just kind of dance around it, that tells me everything I need to know. You're lying. You don't want to answer the question because you understood it. I could tell that you understood it because you intentionally lied about it. You circumvented the entire line of questioning because you knew where she was going with it. So stop it, okay? Don't do that. Don't do that anymore. It makes you look bad. So, in conclusion, I really am encouraged by the direction that the council has been going lately. I really am.
Gabriel, followed by Catherine.
Good evening. My name is Gabriel Moran, and I am proud to serve as a Government Affairs and Policy Associate for Toronto Wireless, a next-generation fixed wireless access company founded right here in the Bay Area with nearly 300 local employees. Last year, we raised over $250,000 for the Valley Medical Foundation at our inaugural Stars and Strides community run to support and celebrate our frontline hospital workers in recognition of their selfless service throughout the COVID-19 crisis. This year, we ask you to join us on Saturday, July 1st, for our third annual Stars and Strides community run to raise $330,000 for the Valley Medical Center Foundation, with 2,500 paying participants and 400 volunteers. Tonight, I have 3 requests. First, please register yourself and your family at starsandstridesrun.com. For our elected leaders, please sign up under the Cal Water elected official / executive 5K challenge. Second, please reach out to your own community members. We have sample texts that you can consider to make this easy. And third, we would be honored to work with your professional staff to be included in any online community communications between now and race day. We have an opportunity to gather to celebrate and support our frontline healthcare workers. Please join us in Discovery Meadow on July 1st and spread the word throughout your communities. Thank you very much.
Catherine, followed by Ms. Rhea Mendoza.
Good evening. I want to know why yesterday a whole bunch of realtors came up and made personal attacks and complaints about things that did not, were outside gossip, basically. If anybody I know had tried to make comments like that, we would have been dragged out by SJPD. I guess the realtors have pretty much bought themselves a mayor and council. Good night.
Ms. Rhea Mendoza, followed by Cheryl.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for this meeting. I know you guys been working a lot. Thank you for all the learning that I'm doing from all the speakers and all the questions. I really was impressed about Vice Mayor. Please, to me as an organizer, that sounds like a campaign conditioning of approval of affordable housing and memorialize. That's something that should be. You made my day, Vice Mayor. I can tell you that much. You made my day. I think we finished in a good talk, and thank you for all your hard work. And yes, let's keep fighting for the community. We need solutions that they really work. Also, the unhoused community members deserve a little better. I don't know if I said it before, but I want to say it again. It's been a lot of talks about homelessness, and that word, please, we can use unhoused. It's a little bit more compassion, a little bit more dignified, and believe me, if we can just change the little things in our city, it will be a better city where we all can live and thrive and be together, and yeah. So thank you. Have a good night.
Cheryl, followed by Tamara.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Hey, 2 whole minutes now. So, yeah, this is Cheryl, and I really want to thank our mayor and all of our council members today. I know it's been a lot of work yesterday and today, and I want to thank you all for working together. And I just hope you all keep communicating more. I mean, we have such a huge city and so many issues, and obviously money is always going to be a problem, right? So I just urge you all to keep working together, and like you did today, and just keep, we have so many perspectives and so many things, and I know you all can work together and do the right things for our city. Thank you all.
Tamara, followed by Joshua.
Good evening. I was just gonna say that I agree with a lot of the people that spoke before me. I really love the questions that Vice Mayor was asking because it's exactly what I was thinking. It was kind of challenging to truly think.
Tony, it has
that-
to be an item not on the agenda.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. Okay, then I guess I just want to thank everyone for everything that has been done so far. But yeah, I was also kind of like, it was kind of frustrating to see like all the realtors, just going one after the other
Okay.
after the other. All right.
Thank you, Joshua. Joshua Melander.
Yeah, this is Joshua with Little Italy, San Jose. I just want to thank you all for collaborating. I know it's been a long meeting. I can't imagine you guys stick through it, but I appreciate the collaboration you all have and appreciate the support for Little Italy. And just wanted to congratulate you for a successful budget and appreciate your support. Thank you.
Back to council.
Thank you all. We're adjourned. Have a great evening.